All right, it's 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, 17th of February 2026. So it's therefore time for a future Melbourne Committee meeting. I declare this meeting open and I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. We are meeting on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed meetings of this meeting will also be available from Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off, thrown in the bin or turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. I'm pleased to say that amongst councillors, no apologies have been received. Before we move into our formal business, there is a condolence statement that I will read, and this is in relation to the passing of Emma Johnston. So on behalf of councillors and the City of Melbourne team, I would like to pass on our condolences to the family, friends, colleagues and students of Professor Emma Johnston AO, who tragically passed away on the 26th of December after a battle with cancer. Emma was an extraordinary scholar and a leader and ambassador for science, research and education. A visionary marine scientist, Emma's work transformed Australia's understanding of coastal and marine ecosystems. From founding the Sydney Harbour Research Program to advancing major national research into pollution and climate impacts. Born and raised in Melbourne, Emma studied at the University of Melbourne before going on to hold leadership roles at some of the country's most significant scientific institutions. She served as a director of the CSIRO and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, a governor of the Ian Potter Foundation and Dean of Science at the University of New South Wales. Emma returned home to Melbourne in 2025 as the University of Melbourne's first female Vice-Chancellor. Her legacy will endure in the research she advanced, the many students and researchers she inspired, and an unwavering belief in the power of science to better understand and care for our oceans and natural environment. She truly was an inspiration to so many, especially young women, considering studies or a career in science. I extend my heartfelt sympathies to her husband and her two children, and to all those whose lives were touched by her presence, particularly those here in the City of Melbourne and in the university community. Emma was a friend of mine. I was so delighted when she returned to Melbourne. I will miss her dearly. We all will. The world has lost a great mind and a beautiful spirit. Vale Emma Johnston AO. Okay. We move on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act 2020 in relation to a matter to be considered by committee, please disclose the type and nature of your interest prior to consideration of the item. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 21 held on Tuesday the 3rd of February 2026. Thank you, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball. Looking for a councillor to second. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Declare that carried unanimously. those minutes have been adopted. Matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. I ask councillors if there's any matters arising from those minutes that we need to call out. No, I don't believe that we do. I was going to say, I now call on Chris Thrum, who did request the opportunity to address the committee in relation to the minutes. Please, Chris, make your way to the lectern.
Photo that was supplied for agenda item 4. If you could put that up on the screen, that would be great. No, I've got agenda item 5. That's public questions. There's another one for agenda item 4. I think you'll find that was the public question one. There should be another photograph.
Okay.
Send in 2 photographs.
I thought this was coming up in. I thought this.
Deja vu. Thanking you.
All right, Chris, I understand you're going to draw to our attention something from the minutes relating to Racecourse Road, which was discussed at our last meeting. I just remind you to please be respectful if your comments go to criticism of anything that was minuted or arose from that meeting.
I appreciate that, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the introduction. I thought that photograph was self-explanatory. That was presented during the presentation last FMC meeting. Thanks to Cal Calhoun for responding in a fine manner. This is a matter relating to the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, the approach is we're looking at page 5 of 17 of the minutes of the meeting. We focus towards the bottom of the page and we note that after the entry, the following person addressed the committee, Chris Thrum. The next line listed is moved, Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees. So now the call out is there is an omission in the notes between the line Chris Thrum and the line moved, Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees. The omission is that during agenda item 6.2 of that night, after Chris Thrum addressed the committee, what occurred was, and I'll say this very clearly, Councillor David Griffiths responded to Chris Thrum's address, presented a straw man argument whilst directing a question to management. Councillor Griffiths fabricated an argument and attributed it to me. Crux of my argument was horse transport trucks travel from interstate country Victoria, Caulfield, Sandown and travel to Flemington Racecourse stables via Racecourse Road onto Smithfield Road. So the sequence concept was Racecourse onto Smithfield. I presented that photo that shows a horse transport truck in the turning lane on Racecourse Road, turning onto Smithfield Road, travelling towards the stables. Now, there's nothing wrong with that photo. That photo tells the truth. It's a horse transport truck using the turning lane, travelling onto Smithfield Road. Now, I pointed out that shot in my address as like while I was addressing the committee 2 weeks ago, I pointed the photo and I said, that section of road must be protected. Councillor Griffiths' concept that he presented in argument was that he was describing vehicles in his argument, saying that I was arguing, he was saying, travelling away from Flemington Racecourse. I quote Councillor Griffiths. At the end of his statement, he said, like, effectively from Smithfield onto Racecourse Road, the complete opposite of what that truck is doing. In my written submission, I wrote, when races are held at Flemington, horses from all over Victoria interstate travel from their stables to Flemington to be stabled there temporarily at race days. Vast majority travel via Racecourse Road onto Smithfield Road. So to be brief, the omission is Councillor Griffiths responded to Chris Thrumm's address presenting a straw man argument whilst directing a question to management.
All right, thank you for that, Chris. I might check in with Evan Council, or potentially my notes here refer to Joe Cannington may have provided some advice on this, or perhaps Rick. I believe this, or our CEO, indeed. Alison, if you want to, or if I can make some remarks, but we might ask management in the first instance.
I think, thank you so much for your question, Mr. Thrum, and it really goes to the accuracy of the minutes and the record of those minutes. So I will take that on notice and confer with our Director of Governance and come back to Council with respect to whether or not there is a need to revise those minutes.
All right. Thank you for that, Alison. And in terms of the slip lane, it is understood.
It's a turning lane. That's a turning lane.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get it clarified then. All right. Thank you for that point, and thank you for attention to detail on these matters, Chris Thrum. Okay. We now move to submissions and correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules in relation to planning item 6.1 Belair Street, Kensington. There is a request to speak from Lorenzo Rigoni from Terrain Consulting. In relation to, not yet, I'm just reading out who's here. Thank you, though, Lorenzo, for your enthusiasm there. In relation to 6.2 Amendment C44 Parkville Heritage, we've got request to speak from Raquel Dow, who is here. Good to see. Martin Turner from Bryce Rayworth. And we have items of correspondence from Jonathan Meehan, on behalf of Daniel Baird, the University of Melbourne, Raquel Dow, Tim Retrott and Martin Turner. In relation to agenda item 6.3, City of Melbourne Heritage Study, Stories of People and Place, we have a request to speak from B. McNicholas. And we have items of correspondence from B. McNicholas, Mary Lou Howie, Tristan Davies, haven't seen him here in a while, from Melbourne Heritage Action, and Nicola Smith. In relation to our agenda item 6.4, Melbourne Cleaning Graffiti Management Outcomes, we've got a request to speak from Tony Penner. In relation to agenda item 7.1, Fairer Melbourne, we have a request to speak from Aaron Moon. In relation to agenda item 7.3, Commonwealth Defence Estate Divestment Opportunities, we've got a request to speak from Tony Penner, Natalie Roberts and David Hamilton. So can I stop there and check? Is there anybody who wished to speak to one of the items this evening who has not heard their name called out? Item 6.3. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes here. So 6.3 will note Stan Capp's request to speak, please. Just remind me when we get to that. All right, thank you, Stan. Okay, anyone else? In that case, we proceed. All right. We have now set aside time for public questions. A 15-minute period has been provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Member of the public may either submit public questions in writing or register to ask a question in person or live via audio link. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 5 public questions received, 3 of which will be asked in person. Pleased to see that. I note that in reading out these questions, we are not attesting to the veracity or factual nature of the statements made. I will now invite Chris Thrum to once again return to the lectern. Chris, you have a question for us.
I've got a photograph. Could you put up the previous one that you had before, the green horse transport truck? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Might note that that's a very large horse transport truck from Goldners, from Sydney. It's from interstate, turning onto Racecourse Road, September 2025 during the Spring Racing Carnival, and it's going to be using the turning lane on Racecourse Road to get onto Smithville Road to get to the stables. Okay, the crux of an argument is that because horse transport trucks travelling to Flemington Racecourse from interstate and country Victoria, Caulfield and Sandown are utilising every day the turning lane on Racecourse Road at the Smithfield Road and Racecourse Road intersection for horse transport trucks to get to the racecourse. The turning lane has to be protected. It's critical to protect the turning lane on Racecourse Road. The question is, does the City of Melbourne understand and recognise and acknowledge that Racecourse Road is an arterial road and that horse transport trucks are travelling through the turning lane on Racecourse Road every day to get to the Flemington stables? See, that's the crux of the argument I was presenting last FMC meeting. So, yeah, does the City of Melbourne recognise, acknowledge and understand that?
Evan, did you want to lead us off on this?
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and through you, and thank you for the question, Chris. I'd actually love to take the time to sit down with you and the team who are leading the Racecourse Road implementation plan and advocacy to really understand the issue you're raising and make sure it's adequately addressed. We do understand the matter you're raising. There is an action for advocacy around investigation in this area for removal of a slip lane. But I just want to make sure...
No. I did not mention the word slip lane in my question. So I think that should not have been mentioned in your response. I'm talking about the turning lane on Racecourse Road in this question. I'm not talking about a slip lane.
Understand.
Okay.
It may be the case that what you're raising through your questions...
No. This is one question. This is one
turning
question.
lane, yes.
The turning lane, Chris.
Chris, Evan Council has very kindly offered to follow up and meet with you and get an understanding, a handle on this issue regarding the turning lane, which you have flagged. And so thank you for that offer.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate
it. That's a very satisfactory response.
Catch up and talk about it?
That's what you've been told.
All right, thank you.
Good one. All right. We also have a question that's been requested from Chris Truman. So I invite Chris to please make his way up to the lectern. Good to see you back at Town Hall, Chris, for 2026.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor and councillors, for listening. Southgate Avenue in South Bank contains a raised pedestrian crossing adjacent to a speed hump. However, the crossing itself drops into a steep gutter channel and rises sharply to the footpath. There's a photo of it up there, as shown in my written question. The footpath also has a significant cross slope. For wheelchair users, mobility scooters, prams and the elderly, this creates a sudden downhill grade into the gutter, a steep uphill exit ramp, lateral drift towards traffic due to crossfall on adjacent footpaths, and a risk of tipping or losing control. This appears inconsistent with AS 1428 continuous accessible path standards. Would Council immediately investigate converting this dangerous crossing into a raised wombat style so that the crossing is level with both footpaths, that the gutter dip is removed, and this is particularly urgent on the western side shown? That could be a temporary solution in preparation for more detailed things later on. This, combined with a 30-kilometre speed posting, would make the crossing much safer for all, and especially for less mobile people. And as a follow-on project, I request that Council would develop a master plan for Southgate Avenue in conjunction with Southbank 3006 and nearby local residents to upgrade the street so that the footpath crossfalls are remediated to meet the standards and the street landscape is upgraded to complement works that are being done at Lark Boonga. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. It's an excellent question. We agree. Southgate Avenue is not up to scratch, and that is why it is one of our priority roadworks in the municipality. so I can confirm for you that we will be commencing those works to upgrade Southgate Avenue in the next financial year, only a few short months away, and that will include commencing public consultation and delivery of the project. There is a development at the end of the street, which is, I believe, influencing the timing and delivery of the works, but we are working on that. The proposed scope of those works, you'll be very pleased to know, does include reconstructing the street to improve footpath crossfalls and making changes to the pedestrian crossing. The final scope of those works will be confirmed through the public consultation process, which I trust you will make sure you are part of. I look to the infrastructure team here. Have I got anything wrong, or do we need to add anything more to that? I'm looking for Rick. Where is... Yep. All right, thank you very much, Chris, for that question. We move on to our next question, which is from Farna Ammett, who is well known to us here at Town Hall. Lord Mayor and councillors, prior to the last council election, the Lord Mayor Nick Rees made promises to the Queen Victoria Market traders regarding fees and charges for traders at the market site, because he acknowledged the detriment to traders of the years-long construction in and around the market and the adverse impact of this and the Franklin Street closure. Fruit and vegetable traders have just found out our trucks that arrive after the loading zone closes, which must unload in the open-air car park, are now being charged a parking fee for the half hour they unload. This new charge will be passed on to traders. Question, what exactly did you mean, Lord Mayor, when you made these representations to traders? Because our trader rents have increased and we are dealing with continuous new penny-grabbing charges from QVM Pty Ltd. Where is this type of unloading activity going to take place when council takes the open-air car park that provides infrastructure for operations at our working market? So it is the case that there have been some changes to fees and charges at the Queen Victoria Market in the last 12 months. That was consistent with the previous annual plan and financial plan for the market. There is now a new plan that is in place for future financial years, and it's certainly my intention as a councillor to do everything I can to see that the commitment that was made around fees for traders is met. Ultimately, the Queen Victoria Market is an independent authority, an independent business of the city, and we will receive advice from QVM Pty Ltd about these things, but it's certainly my intention to make good on commitments that I've made, as is my practice. I might invite any officers who want to add to that, given it is a very broad-ranging question.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the addition I would make to the response is around the question around where the unloading would take place. We spoke to the CEO of QVM this morning, and what he's advised us is that traders and delivery vehicles arriving after 9:30 should be using the designated B2B unloading zone in Upper Shed A, which does not incur any costs. And in terms of the component of the question that references once the open-air car park is no longer in place, part of the Queen Vic Market Renewal Programme of Works will be creating a new unloading and loading bay next to the trader shed. There has been many engagements with traders at the moment where they've walked through the trader shed and have been spoken to about the new processes going forward. And
Farna is putting it to council that their new charges that weren't anticipated, obviously they feel that they are unfair because they are part of the disruption caused by the renewal works. So what is the position of QVM Pty Ltd and indeed yourself regarding those parking costs that are being incurred?
Thank you for the question, Lord Mayor. I echo the point you've made, which is the charges that are being incurred or applied now are as part of their previous business plan that came through council for noting. To the point you made as well, QVM is its own separate entity, so we do note their business plans. We don't endorse or approve those. They will go through a similar process this year where the business plan will come through council. I'm not aware of the content of that business plan, but once we know more, we can advise accordingly.
All right. Thank you for that, Mans.
May I ask a question?
Please.
So if I've understood, if they unload in the B2B section, they're not charged any parking fees?
That is correct, because that's the shed at the back.
Yeah. So does that answer the question?
So that option is available.
Currently.
It is available now. Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I understood to be the case. Thank you. All right. I now invite Aaron Moon to ask a question. Good to see you here, Aaron, back for 2026.
Yes, I've got a picture to put up too. Perfect. So thank you, councillors. At the last council meeting, you spoke strongly about the importance of protecting memorials and recognising their significance in the community. So within the cycling community, there's a long-standing global tradition of placing a ghost bike, like the one pictured here, as an informal memorial when someone has been killed while riding their bike on our roads. It's much like flowers left by the roadside. These white bicycles mark a life lost and serve as a quiet reminder of human cost on our road with our road trauma. Sadly, we have too many of these ghost bikes across the city of Melbourne, and one of these commemorated is Will Richter, a case you would be very familiar with, Lord Mayor. Ghost bikes in Swanston Street have been recently removed by City of Melbourne staff, and community members have had to retrieve them from lost property, while others, like Will Richter's bike, has been vandalised and stolen. For grieving families, friends, and the broader cycling community, these memorials are deeply meaningful. These bikes are an act of remembrance for them. So given Council's stated position and commitment to protecting memorials, will the city recognise informal road death memorials, such as ghost bikes, as legitimate memorials worthy of protection and respectful treatment?
Thanks, Aaron. That's a really good question that you've asked there, and thank you for your ongoing advocacy around cycling matters and cycling safety in this municipality. I might read some comments some remarks that I've been assisted with by officers, and then add to that. So, as I understand it, the City of Melbourne regularly accommodates informal memorials, such as ghost bikes, as temporary tributes. And we do understand the significance that they have to impacted families and friends. However, as Melbourne has finite public space and a rapidly growing population, our streets and footpaths also need to balance the needs of pedestrians, of cars, of bikes, and street life, and the hundreds of thousands of visitors we welcome every day. In addition, given the gravitas of plaques and memorials and their need to pass the test of time, the City of Melbourne believes a robust evaluation process is vital, and that it is why all requests are assessed against the criteria laid out by our plaques and memorials policy. At present, temporary memorials do not come under the scope of this policy, nor are they intended to inform part of the scope of the current review. So that's the response of the city. I must say we do have a review that we are undertaking at the moment of our memorials, and I do wonder if we could maybe, bring this in some way into consideration, or separately consider it. In short, at the moment there's an informal arrangement that's in place where the ghost bikes are allowed to stay there for a period of time and then removed. Let's test and see whether that is still an appropriate arrangement going forward. At the very least, we should have a position at the city on something as important as this. So thank you for bringing it to the attention of council here this evening. Aaron. Hang on. Aaron, I think we've got a question from Councillor Philip Leilu.
Aaron, thanks for bringing. This is something I've kind of noticed, but I've never really understood it. Just based on your knowledge, how long do they usually last for, like so in temporary, and also what is the expectation that because it's temporary, right? So it needs to go some time. What's the expectation that people want to? Because one of the easy way could be we can agree on a particular time frame, right? So if it's if they're looking for maybe 3 weeks, but then we do it after 1 week, so maybe we do have it. But I do note that it's used for a lot of bikes and everything, and for the biking community and everything. Do you have an idea what's the time frame that the families or the cycling community is interested in having? Like, is there a specific time?
So to answer your question, I don't put these bikes up, so it's not me who do it, and it's like Bike Melbourne who facilitate this with donated bikes. But for this bike in particular that I've taken a picture of today, that bike is on King Street, and I think her name was Akumi. She was a Japanese student, and that bike's been there since 2021. So this is kind of the length that bike has been there. I know there's other bikes in the city I'm not so familiar with. Akumi's like the one I ride past every day, that have been there for longer. But yeah, this is kind of the one I go past every day, and I kind of keep watch of this bike, but there's so many of them for many years longer.
And thank you for bringing this matter to our attention, Aaron. All right, the time for public questions has now elapsed. A reminder, there will be a further 15 minutes allocated at the conclusion of this meeting, where we can return to some of the written questions and from others who may still be with us. We move on to agenda item 6, reports from management, and I call on the Deputy Lord Mayor, Rashina Campbell, to assume the role of chair of the meeting in relation to reports where council exercises its responsibilities under the Planning and Environment Act.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Under this section of the meeting, there are 2 reports from management. The first is agenda item 6.1, planning permit application TP 2024-902 118 Blair Street, Kensington. Would councillors like a presentation of this item? No? I now call on Lorenzo Rigoni from Terrain Consulting Group, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Lorenzo, please make your way to the lectern, and I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Lorenzo Rigoni. I'm a Director of Planning at Terrain Consulting Group. And I'm here on behalf of the permit applicants, Peter Lynch and Rosemary Neville-Jones, being the owners of 118 Ballet Street, Kensington. This is for rear additions to a dwelling in a heritage area. And I'd like to thank Lord Mayor Rees, the councillors and council officers for the opportunity to speak before the council this evening. This application's had a long gestation through council, but we've worked very closely with the council officers. Firstly, it was lodged in 19th December 24, and it was advertised in March 25. And then the architect made some changes to the design to address some of the objections that came through. It was advertised for a second time on the 29th of April 25. In total, there were 22 objections. And it's that point that our office got involved in June 25, so about 6-7 months later. And our role was to review the proposal, look at the objections, have an understanding what the issues were, and provided some advice in terms of some changes and revisions to the proposal. We had several discussion plans with council in July 25, worked very constructively with the officers. And in early August, the clients actually had a chat to the neighbours at 120 Ballet Street before we formally lodged the application back to council to address issues of overshadowing. And then in 11th of August, the council's office would know there was a major change to the planning scheme via VC 282, so changed all the ball game for shadowing analysis. We took all that into account, and then our office in August actually met up with the neighbours as well at 120 Ballet Street, showed discussion plans, walked them through the process. The outcome was the matters of overshadowing were addressed, and then it was advertised for a third time in December 2025. The council officer's report goes through in detail all the changes. The major changes were a first floor over the garage was deleted, and the first floor was set back such that that was critical, addressed all the issues foreshadowing to the neighbours. And the outcome, we've got a really good balance in our view to address the client's objectives for this small inner city site, and also at the same time working alongside the neighbours and educating. So I won't go through the rest of my notes. I'm conscious that there was a submission earlier today, but respectfully request that, particularly given the research and the journey this has gone through, we think it's a very good outcome, and respectfully ask that the council adopt the recommendation as proposed by the council officers. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lorenzo. I'm just going to check if there are any questions from my councillor colleagues. No, thank you for your submission. Feel free to resume your seat. I'm now going to ask for a motion to be put up on the screen. I'm going to move that motion, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. And I'm now going to speak to that motion. The planning application before us tonight is seeking permission for the partial demolition and the construction of a two-storey rear addition and the reconstruction of the front fence and external painting of a heritage building at 118 Belair Street in Kensington. It is, of course, quite rare to see planning applications of this scale in this committee, but it does speak to the robust nature of democracy at a local government level. The applicant is Terrain Consulting Group, the draftsperson is New Dimension Drafting Proprietary Limited, and the estimated cost of the development is $600,000. The site is located in the Neighbourhood Residential Zone, Schedule 3, and it's affected by the Heritage Overlay, HO9 Kensington Precinct. As you've heard, there was public notice of the application and 22 objections were received. I note none of those objectors, I believe, are present tonight or seeking to speak or make submissions. However, having had the benefit of those objections, the key concerns raised included visual bulk and prominence, off-site amenity impacts including overshadowing to private open space, overlooking and loss of daylight, and the proposal's response to heritage and neighbourhood character. The key matters for Council's consideration in the assessment of this application are the mandatory requirements of the zone, heritage, residential amenity, and tonight, in my remarks, I will certainly be having regard to and considering the matters raised by the objectors. The assessment as set out in the planning report, attachment 3, outlines that this application is consistent with the relevant provisions and policies of the Melbourne Planning Scheme. It achieves an appropriate heritage outcome, and it will not result in unreasonable off-site amenity impacts. However, I would like to address in some detail the matters raised by the objectors. The first of which is overshadowing. While the proposal does result in some additional shadow to private open space, in particular at number 120, the proposal complies with the standard, numerical standard, clause 54.04-3, and 120 Belair Street continues to receive a reasonable amount of sunlight. Then dealing with the matter of the loss of daylight and sky views. The development is not opposite any habitable room windows of existing dwellings. To the north and south, adjoining properties' private open space will maintain direct sunlight and view to sky access in accordance with residential standards. The proposal, in management's view, would not result in any unreasonable loss of daylight. Now dealing with the overlooking. All windows with the potential to overlook the private open space or any habitable room windows of adjoining properties are screened in accordance with clause 54, avoiding any direct views to and from habitable room windows and private open space. And finally, and very importantly, dealing with the objections in relation to heritage and neighbourhood character. This proposal delivers an appropriate heritage outcome by fully retaining the principal part of the dwelling and setting back the addition in line with heritage policy. While the addition is partially visible from the street, its setback ensures the original dwelling remains the dominant element. The contemporary design is intentionally distinguishable from the Victorian fabric, consistent with policy requirements. Overall, the heritage response is appropriate and supported by Council's Heritage Advisor. However, I do note that the amended plans adopted pick up some recommendations from objectors, including the removal of the rear second-storey garage and a reduction in the maximum building height by 250 millimetres. The amended design also explored other design options to achieve reduced visual bulk, shadowing to private open space and daylight for adjoining properties, and the amended plans decrease the setback of the first floor addition from the street to reduce overshadowing private space to number 116. Can I close by thanking our planning team, who I note, as you've heard tonight, have worked closely on this matter for now quite a long period of time. I commend the recommendation to my councillor colleagues, and with that, over to you, Councillor Laylo.
Thank you, and echo everything. I won't repeat everything you said. I do want to also thank our planning team as well. I note that while sometimes we sit in, I guess, the defence of, heritage and everything, but then at this time it just shows that we're also be able to support development and also change. I note that we are actually voting on the heritage strategy today, and which I've always been saying to our team about what happens if we want to put a solar panel, what happens if you want to build over it, and so it's kind of fitting that this kind of these applications do come forward. I do note the objections. I do hope. Look, it's having good neighbours is always important, and I do hope that once we pass this, that it goes back to it. And I do, as I raised in portfolio and everything, I think the development's really. I quite like the development. I do think it's going to add a lot of value to the property and also to the street, which I'm sure other. The neighbours will, I think, appreciate in time in going forward, and I do hope that they come together and everything. I do think that sometimes, yes, it is important to protect heritage and everything, but at the same time, there is development needed, and I do hope that going forward that everyone can work together and see the need for it. So happy to support this and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Councillor Laylu. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. With that, I'll put the motion to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That has passed unanimously. That takes us to agenda item 6.2, Amendment C444, the Parkville Heritage Post-Exhibition. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No? All right. I call on Raquel Dow from Zotis, who has requested the opportunity to address this committee. Raquel, if you could make your way up to the lectern, and I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. As you have mentioned, my name is Raquel Dow. I represent Zoetis, and I am the ANZ platform lead overseeing 3 manufacturing sites in ANZ, including the manufacturing plant in Parkville. Zoetis is a leading global animal health company. Zoetis discovers, develops, manufactures, and commercializes vaccines, medicines, diagnostics, and other technologies for companion animal and livestock. Zoetis, closer to our region, Zoetis Australia produces medicines and vaccines relied upon by more than 80% of Australia's cattle, sheep, poultry, pig, and equine industries. Zoetis Australia serves as a strategic research, development, and manufacturing hub, which plays an important role within Zoetis's Asia-Pacific and global operations. Zoetis lodged submissions as part of the public exhibition of the amendment, but welcomes the opportunity to appear before the council again. Zoetis wishes to emphasise the significance of the site as a planned biomedical hub, part of the broader redevelopment of the area into an industry, business, hospital, and research institute precinct in Parkville. There is ongoing active collaboration between Zoetis and the state government to redevelop the site to maximise its potential use for research and manufacturing moving forward. Zoetis currently produces 130 million vaccine doses per year at the site, and we have committed to further developing the site into a world-leading biomedical centre for innovation and advanced manufacturing. Zoetis recognises the history and importance of the site, and it welcomes the outcome of the balances that the recognition of the heritage values, but does not restrict building on the legacy of the site, allowing its legacy to continue by realising the proposed biomedical precinct. The proposed heritage overlay, HO 1442, as proposed, could potentially result in the restriction of this redevelopment and the full potential of the site. Zoetis has reviewed the post-exhibition report, and it welcomes the indication from both the consultant and the committee that the matter is to be referred to the planning minister with a request that she convene an independent planning panel. It also welcomes the recommendations specific to the HO 1442 that building categories for individual buildings should be identified and a reduction in the heritage overlay curtilage be prepared. However, there has been insufficient detail regarding the revised overlay for Zoetis to properly inform as to whether it's concerned, as outlined in the primary submission, have been addressed, and therefore Zoetis cannot be satisfied that any proposed amendments have been meaningfully addressed the matters raised by Zoetis. Zoetis will reserve the position regarding the proposed heritage overlay and the planning scheme amendment, and will reiterate our request to be heard at any future hearing, including any planning panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raquel, and thank you for your submission in writing as well. I now call on Martin Turner. Hi, Martin. If you could make your way to the lectern, Martin from Bryce Rawworth Proprietary Limited. I remind you to address the committee for no more than 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. I've been asked to comment on the appropriateness under Amendment C444 to include the oval of University High School as a significant place in the south, what would be the South Parkville precinct, and the land to the rear of the school's main heritage building, also within HO4 as a non-contributory place. And it is my view that this proposal is inappropriate and unwarranted from a heritage perspective, and the significance or contribution of those elements of University High have not been established adequately in the Parkville Heritage Review. Looking to what is offered by way of an explanation for this change to the heritage status of University High grounds, what I could find by way of the best explanation, the Parkville Heritage Review, can be found in the description for the precinct in the exhibited citation. To paraphrase us, I guess for the sense of the benefit of a lack of time, in essence, why it has been put forward, as my understanding at least, is a number of factors, including the ability that the school oval and its footprint and its boundary walls offer by way of interpretation of the layout of the livestock horse market that had occupied this site and a much larger part of South Parkville historically prior to the establishment of University High School. And it's also stated in the Parkville Heritage Review that the oval is representative of desire for green open space in the suburb, providing a visual break from the surrounding development and having retained its low-scale open space and character. In the first instance, I would say the oval has undergone quite a number of changes, not least of which is being excavated for a basement car park. There are more modern buildings of the high school that have been built on that. It does not represent the original historic setting of the University High School. And once more, there is no tangible fabric to demonstrate the link to the livestock market. That is best demonstrated by the walls that are retained within the Victorian Heritage Register on other parts that interface with other parts of Parkville. So that is an appropriate recognition of that significance. And there is no particular evidence as to the oval being established as a demonstration of giving green or open space to the school, to the broader area of Parkville. It was historically a walled enclosure with structures and horse stalls and various other built form. It was not open. It does not represent what is surviving now of a historic footprint. It would not have been experienced historically by the residents of Parkville as green open space. It was an enclosed livestock compound. And on that basis, I do not believe it contributes to the significance of the precinct. What is significant about University High School is established by the Heritage Council in the registration hearing, wherein the curtilage was limited to a fairly confined area around the historic late 1920s building of the high school.
Thank you, Martin. I'm just going to check if my councillor colleagues have any questions of Martin. No. In that case, I'm going to ask a question of Joe Cannington, if I may. So, Martin, you're very welcome to take your seat. I was going to ask you, Joe, or whoever would like to do it, for management's view on the matters raised in Martin's submission.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Through you, Lord Mayor, we have actually made a recommendation in the FMC papers submitted this evening that reflects the position that has just been talked about, recommending realigning the Heritage Overlay 4. So we would just encourage the submitter to review our work and see if that satisfactorily meets their concerns, or to then attend the panel hearing in the event that it doesn't. But we think it's satisfactorily met. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. Did any other councillors have questions? Joe? No? All right, thank you. I am now going to ask for a motion to be put on the screen. Yes, I'm going to move that motion, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I will now speak to that motion. Can I begin by thanking our team for the work that has occurred on this matter over what I think is over 2 years now. It is significant, and we are now advanced in what has been a very long process. Can I also thank our submitters, in particular those that have attended in person tonight. Thank you for your engagement with this process, and we are certainly better for having that level of engagement. Tonight, Council is being asked to consider submissions received during the exhibition of Amendment C444, Parkville Heritage, and to endorse recommended changes and management responses that have been prepared, and to request that the Minister for Planning appoint an independent panel to review the unresolved submissions in accordance with the Planning and Environment Act. Just to paint the picture of what has happened to date, the Parkville Heritage Review identified the need to update and modernise heritage controls in Parkville. The previous studies dated back to 1979 and 1985. It is clear that much has happened since that time, but notably, Parkville now plays a significant role as a major health, research and education precinct, and the existing heritage controls were simply outdated. This review ensures decisions are based on the current and accurate heritage information. In November 2023, Council sought authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare and exhibit this amendment, and that authorisation was granted almost 2 years later in May 2025. The amendment was publicly exhibited between September and October 2025, and 19 submissions were received. They ranged in response from full support to support with minor adjustments to objections, and those objections were primarily from education, research and institutional stakeholders affected by proposed overlays. All submissions must be considered under the Planning and Environment Act, and a detailed response to each has been prepared. The submissions highlighted areas where refinements were needed. For example, updates to the Avenue Precinct citation, realigning the South Parkville boundary, applying an individual heritage overlay to part of 30 to 36 Flemington Road, and refining the schedule and curtilage for the former Commonwealth Serum Laboratories site. So where are we now? Well, we have completed public exhibition. We have received and analysed all the submissions. Our team has developed and recommended some modifications to the amendment based on expert advice, and we have identified several unresolved submissions that now require independent assessment. Under Section 23 of the Act, unresolved matters must be referred to an independent planning panel. And so that is what we are seeking to do today. We are, in this motion, endorsing the recommended changes to the amendment and requesting the Minister for Planning appoint an independent panel to consider those submissions. Can I again thank the team for their extensive work on this matter? Can I thank the submitters for their engagement in this process? And can I commend this item to my councillor colleagues? Over to you, Councillor Leilu.
Thank you. Happy to support this as well, given that it's pretty interesting read to see what Parkville was before, and given the amount of corporate and innovation and ideas that has actually taken up residence in Parkville, not least the education sector and also the STEM and everything. I do note that while we need to protect heritage, but at the same time we do need to ensure that there is enough room for development. And I would also ask all the submitters to also have a look at, once we approve the heritage strategy, there are elements in there that actually will go to some of the things that you're talking about. And I hope that you do take notice of that, because we do take it very seriously, and it's something that I want to see and hope there are more developments and also more, engagement with not only with council but also with the local community in respect with balance to the heritage. So please have a look at that once that approved. It's on tonight as well, so we're voting on that a bit later. But that also addresses a lot of it, especially Action 2.5 or 2.6, I can't remember, where the economic, social, environmental values sometimes outweigh the heritage. I'm trying to get the wording of it, but do have a look at that, and I hope that that's something that we could work together so that your comments and everything will be taken into account. But overall, happy to support this. I do think that this is probably one of the very last heritage reviews that is still been doing. I don't think so, East Melbourne, I'm not too sure. But that's a long piece of history and work, and it's been a great way for the city to know itself. And I do welcome, and I want to thank the team for all the work that they have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leiloo. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That has passed unanimously. We now move to agenda item 6.3, the City of Melbourne Heritage Strategy 2026, Stories of People and Place. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No. In that case, I am going to turn to our submitters, and I understand Stan Capp, you're seeking to address the committee tonight. Stan, I know you already know this, but please make your way to the lectern and address the committee for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor and Lord Mayor and councillors. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the City of Melbourne team for producing this document that endeavours to crystallise in a digestible way the multiplicity of issues and perspectives that unsurprisingly prevail in this highly important area. The team that has undertaken a rigorous process deserves acknowledgement and appreciation. I'm pleased to do so. As one committed to community engagement, I also acknowledge the work undertaken by Open House Melbourne, who are responsible for a comprehensive process of eliciting views across the broad range of interested stakeholders. Having lived in our CBD for over 25 years, my wife Pam and I have witnessed firsthand the many developmental triumphs and, putting it bluntly, catastrophes that have occurred over this period. We love living in our city and, despite the frustrations, understand the inherent conflicting objectives of development and heritage protection. Some of the compromises we observe need to be addressed by this policy. I know that there are several areas where the policy can be strengthened, and the work of my community colleague, B. McNicholas, has provided detailed advice that should be seriously considered. I support a process that enables these positive amendments to be addressed in a systematic and constructive manner. A particular area of immediate attention should be directed to the implementation and governance phase and section of this strategy. To that end, and to ensure the strategy progresses expeditiously, I'm advocating for a governance and management structure that will offer advice to FMC that is meaningful, objective and complements the views of council officers. I support the establishment of a City of Melbourne Community Heritage Committee that has a remit to advise FMC on the implementation of the heritage strategy, propose sensible amendments and oversee how we plan, manage and protect our heritage places, parks or gardens better. Particular matters could be referred to the Community Heritage Committee for advice. One example might be a controversial planning application, such as the Comedy Theatre proposal or the appropriateness of the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show that sequesters for several weeks the UNESCO World Heritage listed Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens. Or it could even look for advice about the heritage responsibilities that the council has at the Queen Victoria Market. It's self-evident that the City of Melbourne needs to create a high-level focus on heritage within its executive leadership team. The strategy sets a new direction based on a broad, people-centred, across council and citywide approach to cultural heritage, and this must be reflected at the highest levels within the organisation. The creation of an appropriately resourced heritage division, headed up by a General Manager of Heritage, would be one way of demonstrating the commitment. In summary, I submit that the FMC should, 1, approve the heritage strategy as a living document, noting that there are potentially further amendments that may be forthcoming. 2, determine that implementation is critical and that a Community Heritage Committee should be established with terms of reference to be confirmed that indicate its advisory and oversight nature. And 3, seek the advice of the CEO on how the appointment of a General Manager of Heritage and the establishment of an appropriately resourced heritage division can be realised. Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Stan. I now call on B. McNicholas, who's requested the opportunity to address the committee. B, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors, CEO, and for the opportunity to speak today. I endorse the words of Dr. Stan Kapp also. And I want to thank, before I get into my details, the Joe Cannington and Dana Fonanda, who've done excellent work, astounding work and committed work on this heritage strategy, and they really do deserve, as Stan also said, credit for that and thanks for that. And just because today I'm presenting, and in my submission I presented some of the few brief changes I want in the implementation section, isn't a criticism of that. It's making it operationalised, and that's at the implementation plan part at the end of the strategy they've presented today. So it's just to make it better and make it work and be successful. I should also let you know I'm representing a number of community heritage groups and environment groups, and that I happen to be a world expert on strategic cultural heritage management internationally. I helped set up the field as background. Okay, there's some slides up there too, and I'm sorry they're quickly done. The draft heritage strategy is a significant 10-year document with far-reaching impacts. Heritage really matters. We ask you to support it with brief amendments recommended to enable successful implementation of this strategy. We are focusing the submission particularly on the implementation plan section of this important heritage strategy. This is essential in order to ensure its successful operationalisation. We ask for amendments, in particular in the implementation plan section, to enable the success of the strategy, the operationalisation, as it's often called, required to put this into action to achieve the presented draft strategy plan's core of 1, a whole of council, people-centred and citywide approach, which are the tenets and basic tenet approaches of the heritage strategy. 2, stewardship, which is one of the stated priority areas in the heritage strategy. If you could go over to the next slide. Recommendations, therefore, 2 particular ones I'm talking about today, and they coincide with what Dr. Stan Kapp has presented. One is we propose the establishment of a General Manager heritage position, an executive level position, reporting to the CEO. This will include executive accountability, master plan authority, referral triggers, and stewardship alignments with values. The governance reform of this aligns with council's architecture. Can I say?
I might ask you to conclude your remarks, B. We are at time, so if there's something you would like to say in conclusion, you're welcome to do that.
Okay. This will protect our irreplaceable heritage assets, and it will diminish risk and financial risk through council. And the second area is the establishment of a City of Melbourne Community Heritage Committee, which is critical and was part of the tenet or the approach that is outlined in Council's presented heritage strategy for people-centred. Heritage is so important to the City of Melbourne, and if you want to make it all of council and citywide and people-centred, I urge you to make these couple of amendments. If you turn over to...
sorry, B, we are now well over time for your submission,
right.
so I'm going to ask you to resume a seat.
I will make this available, and that document was presented in my submission, but it outlines that it's a second pillar. It's management of council's wealth of heritage, registered and heritage listed places, parks and gardens, where it's currently failing and which will be improved if you add brief comments in the implementation section to enable the success of this strategy, its implementation.
Thank you, B.
That's
very helpful. And thank you also for your written submission, which councillors have had the benefit of.
Thank you.
I am now going to ask for a motion to be put on the screen, and it is going to be an alternate motion. And if I could just ask you to scroll down, council business. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that is the motion that I seek to move, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I will now speak to that motion. I'm really, really pleased to be moving this motion tonight in support of adopting the City of Melbourne's Heritage Strategy 2026, Stories of People and Place. Can I begin by thanking the community for your participation in the consultation process, for providing your valuable feedback, and to those of you who have turned up in person tonight to make submissions. We are better for it. I want to talk about how we got here. As many of you will know, the City of Melbourne has done a wealth of work when it comes to heritage, but that work historically has been very focused on the built form. And of course, the built form remains important, but it's not the full picture. Thousands of people celebrated Melbourne's 2050 vision. They helped us to shape it, and they sent us a very clear message. It was that Melbourne is a city for people, a city whose strength lies in the diversity, the resilience, the talents and the grit of the people who live, work, study, visit and build businesses here. However, historically, this did not come through in our heritage strategy. Our community told us that Melbourne's identity comes from our diverse stories, and we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate those stories, those people, those intercultural connections and our creativity. And that is exactly what this heritage strategy is about. It is about honouring the stories that make Melbourne and how those stories continue to shape the city that we are now becoming. As many of you know, in fact, probably all of you know in this room, those histories don't sit separately. They coexist, they overlap, and they interact. There are so many examples of this, but one, not very far from here, is the Little Lon precinct, right here in our CBD. Historically considered a slum, it was actually a rich, multi-layered community. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it saw waves of migration, first Irish families, then Chinese, German Jewish families, Lebanese families, and Italian migrants all made it their home. They lived in small cottages, side by side, with workshops, cafes, tobacconists, and tiny factories, as waves of families and migrants created the stories of Melbourne. Sadly, and perhaps this tells us just how important heritage is, in the late 1950s, the northern half of that precinct was almost entirely demolished. Luckily, some significant parts remain in the southern part, including one of the cottages that is now home to a gin distillery, which speaks to the ongoing, changing stories of Melbourne, but the importance of retaining heritage and honouring those stories and people. Little Lon shows us how one place can hold so many stories at once, stories that are stories of Melbourne, of struggle, of opportunity, of migration, of belonging, of challenge and resilience, and it reminds us why we need to have a heritage strategy that reflects the full tapestry of Melbourne. In this heritage strategy, we celebrate honouring First Nations, custodian and cultural continuity, acknowledging this city's colonial history and embracing the contributions of waves of migrants to multicultural Melbourne. Of course, this isn't just about the past of Melbourne, it's about shaping our shared understanding of who we are now and who we will become. While in the past, the strategy focused on built form, we know Melbourne is about more than that. This is a strategy not just about buildings, but about people and their stories that make Melbourne. In closing, can I thank our team, led by Joe and Evan, for what has been an outstanding amount of work and, as you've heard tonight, very much an appreciated outcome of that work. And can I also thank my predecessors in this portfolio, the Lord Mayor and Councillor Leppert, who were really the people who brought this work initially to this chamber. But I am very delighted to be able to move this motion tonight and commend it to my councillor colleagues. Over to you, Councillor Leilu.
Cheers, thank you. I also agree. I think this is a very important document, but nevertheless, it's one that we have different policies, guidelines, but this strategy does put in focus some particular aspects where we have not considered and we probably should. I'm very conscious of the fact that while heritage and development is sometimes conflicting, but then sometimes there are ways to which you can work together and build on that. And I think we have actually done a very good job, not only us, but also the industry to actually create innovative solutions to ensure that the city not only just stagnate, but also grows and develop. I put a focus on, I guess, Action 2.6, mainly because that there is a channel that should, there is a part where everything does not make sense and, we would probably object to it. There is an avenue to which we could actually work together and come up with something so that, if there is a benefit to the City of Melbourne and it's a greater than what is actually developed, I think that's something that we should be able to review and develop. If we looked at all the current heritage building sites that have development on them, if we actually follow the current rules, we wouldn't actually be able to do some of those things. I'll take, for example, the dome over Melbourne Central. You can't build over, the actual heritage site. So technically, you couldn't actually build the dome over that if we actually did it at the current site. But if there is something that which then Melbourne Central came to us and actually go, you know what, we want to build a dome over it, but in exchange, we'll help you build a park. We'll help you get a bit more a playground or some other kind of contribution, then I think that's something that we should all be able to respect, and just not a straight no just because it's heritage. So I do thank the team for a great piece of work. I do hope that it's not going to be a particular challenge to new applications. I want to see more developments in the city with respect to heritage. I do note that this is a document that's going to help applicants to assess and work together with them to ensure that there is the right balance. And so in this instance, this is actually an improvement rather than a hindrance. And so let's see how that goes, and hopefully we can get some great creative outcomes from this.
Thank you, Councillor Laylow. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Yes, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball.
Thank you. I have a question, if I may, about this amendment we can see in the blue text. So as I understand it, and for those who are present or watching who don't have the report before them, the action 6.2 is I beg your pardon, thank you. 2.6 is to develop guidance and policy tools that define when economic, social or environmental considerations will outweigh heritage objectives. And this amendment suggests that action should be the highest priority in the strategy. Is that correct?
Do you want to address this, Councillor, or I might ask Jo Cannington if you would like to speak to...
I'm addressing it to the author of the amendment.
That is Councillor Laylow. That is Councillor Laylow.
Thank you.
Jo, happy to jump in as well if you want to answer it. So yes, I do believe that it is wrong because that is probably the most practical. So we have actually seen, not just today, but also a few other heritage development applications that's come through that's related to heritage. And so there is, I guess, so if we put this out there, the first instance, people's going to say, okay, well, that's another barrier and that's another step that, we need to actually go through to this. What I've actually proposed is saying that while we are developing, I don't think the team's going to focus purely on this. I think, this will be part of the works that we'll be doing because it's a lot of work. But I do want the team to focus on 2.6 because if there are applications, so we just heard from the Parkville Heritage study where people do want to actually develop. So in this instance where there is a heritage, there could be a barrier, at least there is a pathway or there is a way which we could actually work together with the industry or the applicants so that it's no longer a straight no, because otherwise it's going to be a straight no and there is no other avenue or opportunities to develop. Whereas what I'm saying with prioritising 2.6, so that when we do find things that is of heritage significance and therefore that's a straightaway no, we have another channel to which then can work together. So that's my
So my question is that action 2.6 is already in the strategy before us as a recommendation from management. But your amendment is to make that particular action the highest priority in the strategy. Is that correct?
Yes.
I see.
And
does that have...
Sorry, Councillor Dr. Ball, I'm just going to exercise my right as chair to ask a question at this point, which I might ask of Joe Cannington, which is what is management's interpretation of what 10.2 will now require?
Thank you, councillors. I think our interpretation is this is a 10-year strategy and we'll be doing a whole range of different actions. I think what this does to us is brings this specific action to our attention to think about how we would prioritise that within our work program more broadly.
So can I ask, Chair,
You may, of course.
does management support this? My plain reading of this amendment is that action 2.6 will become the key priority of this strategy. That's how I understand this. Is that, do you have...
Councillor Dr. Ball, I believe the CEO wishes to provide an answer.
I do, and the management position is the recommendation as published in the agenda. That's the recommendation that management supports. So we can certainly provide our interpretation of the amendment, but to ask us to indicate whether we support or otherwise isn't really appropriate to do, given our position is the management recommendation.
I see, but management often stress tests amendments.
We
and
can
gives
certainly
advice on those
provide our
amendments.
feedback.
So I understand your answer is that management does not support this amendment to lift this action above all others in order of importance. Could I therefore ask a procedural point of order, something, to have this amendment put as a separate vote, whether we add 10.2?
You'd like to split the vote, yes.
I would like to split the vote.
Yes, understood. Thank you.
And I have one final question, if I may.
Yes, you may, and then I'll ask one after that. Over to you, Councillor Dr.
Thank you. So further on clause 10.2, this key piece of work, which is to prepare guidance and policy tools, this amendment says that progress will be brought back to council laws, which is quite a key difference from to council. So something that is management brings to council laws is not public. We get a briefing in a private sense, and yet the action is to develop guidance and policy tools, which will presumably be a public tool, a public document.
Sorry, I think, is that a question of management though, Councillor Dr. Ball? Is that who you
I think how management interprets this is relevant before we vote on it. So your interpretation is material to our decision.
I can respond there as well. Generally speaking, council laws does provide us with the discretion of choosing a briefing of council or a meeting of council, whereas specifying council does require us to come back to the formal council forum.
And yet the document that will be developed already in the existing strategy that was management's recommendation is to develop a policy tool, and presumably that tool is a document that would be public at some point. Is that correct?
This might be one for you, Joe Cannington.
That is correct, that the final decision regarding any policy position would come back to council.
I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball, I don't, in light of that, have any further questions of management, but I note your request for the motion to be split when it comes to the vote. Before we do that, though, I will ask, would any other councillors like to speak to this motion?
But are we speaking to the amendment? Or
No, this is an alternate motion. So this is the motion that has been moved by the mover and seconded. Yes, so we're not debating an amendment. This is the motion before us. Yes, Lord Mayor.
So my question's for either the CEO or for Joe Cannington. Can I just clarify Amendment 10.2, the new 10.2 prioritise action 2.6 is the key work item for FY 26-27 and request that management report back progress to councillors. Can you explain to us what the practical effect of that amendment is? Does it mean that other areas of action will now not occur? Is there an opportunity cost of agreeing to this amendment, which would mean that other actions which were previously identified in the management report as a priority will now not occur because of this change in order of the actions?
The short answer is no. I think we've got to remember that what we're putting towards you this evening is a whole suite of actions that will occur over a 10-year period. We will now, depending on the decision this evening, then think about how we program this piece of work. I think the feedback that we've got through this alternate motion that Councillor Leilou has raised, the request that we prioritise one of these actions, doesn't mean over others. It's requesting it happens within this first trench of work, so we'll now need to think about how we adjust our work program to meet that. There's a whole lot of work for us to do to operationalise this. The new amendment to this work also needs to be considered, how we actually roll this out now. So I think the decision in front of you this evening is to progress the work, and then the way I'm reading 10.2 is a request that we provide progress back to councillors. That's not necessarily decisions. So it's just flagging that in this specific action, there's been a request for us to provide that progress update as well.
Yep, thank you. And action 2.6, to be clear, it calls on council to develop clear guidance and policy tools that define when economic, social or environmental considerations may appropriately outweigh objectives to retain heritage building fabrics. So Councillor Leilou has spoken to economic factors, but indeed that action takes into account other inputs such as environmental considerations and social considerations as well.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that I think this is a really good discussion, because this is the tension of heritage, and this is what we're hearing through this almost 700 people that contributed to this piece of work, is that they want us to think more broadly about, what does this mean in terms of heritage, and we had that request to really try to think about how we balance and consider on merit those different situations that present to us each day.
Thank you, Joe. Did you also wish to speak to this item, Lord Mayor? Was that? Yes. Yes. Okay. Councillor Leilou.
So I think just to satisfy Councillor Ball, but for example, sorry, Joe, in this regards, the amount of I know there are other parts of it where we look at solar panels and everything going forward. So just based on the current environment and everything going forward, if somebody wanted to put a solar panel on a very significant heritage building, that's a straight probably no, right? So with this particular 2.6, we're looking at options where it is to help, I guess, to be more energy efficient, to be more, I guess, to help all of that, to which then actually facilitate kind of that renewable energy. Would that be correct in a way that, and also the fact that the 2.6, it would actually take probably the longest time compared to the majority of the work that's been done. So starting it early would actually be a better sense. Is that correct?
I think there's a whole range of actions that will take different lengths of time for us to complete.
Sure.
But I think your point is we have to actually do the work to understand the answer to that question. So it's not a binary question of this is the right type of building. We need to actually understand that and test it, and that's why we've recommended the requirement to do this work to develop that guidance and policy position so that we can have more certainty for you when you're making your decisions.
Thank you, Joe. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Yes, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I feel duty-bound to speak to this item given the many years it's been moving through this organisation and my own involvement in the previous term as with responsibilities in planning and heritage. Can I firstly begin by thanking tonight's submitters. Great to see B. McNicholas here, Stan, Cap and others. I note Mary Lou Howie's made a submission, Tristan Davies, real pity Tristan's not here, but he's an absolute giant of heritage here in Melbourne, and we have a fabulous community of people who are really engaged in heritage policy in this city, and we are so much better as a city for that community. Can I also thank the folks here at Team Melbourne, Dana Forhander, Clover Aspadola, Tanya Walkenberg, Harry Marcoux, Joe Cannington, of course, and Evan Council. Gee whiz, we've been working on this for a number of years and there's been a lot of us involved, and so props to all of you. This has been a really active part of the City of Melbourne's planning strategy over recent years for very good reason. Firstly, it's a reflection of Melbourne's growing appreciation of our heritage buildings and the heritage legacy of the city. And secondly, it's a reflection of the value that people see in those treasured buildings and places and the importance of protecting them. The truth is, Melbourne has lost far too many buildings. It's a tragedy, really. But we've kept a lot as well, certainly far more than many other cities around Australia. Indeed, I think our fabulous catalogue of heritage buildings and places is a really unique and distinctive feature of Melbourne. It sets us apart from other cities. I know there are plenty of cities around the world who would love to have the buildings that we have with their wonderful, wonderful history. So it's really important that this work has been undertaken, and I'm certainly looking forward to voting for this work to proceed. I think there's some really interesting and innovative dimensions to this 2026 Melbourne Heritage Strategy Stories of People and Place. I'm particularly pleased to see the references in there to protecting previously overlooked places, such as modernist buildings and building interiors. I'm also particularly pleased to see, that's in Action 2.1, I'm also really pleased to see the references in there to embedding the cultural heritage of special places in our heritage considerations as well. You know, a classic example I often think of is the John Curtin Hotel there in Lygon Street in Carlton. If you're assessing the value of the John Curtin Hotel purely in terms of its architecture and the building itself, you might say it struggles to meet a heritage threshold. But if you consider the fact that for well over 100 years it was a meeting place for the Labor movement and a really important part of the political and social history of Melbourne. If you consider it was the place where Bob Hawke cut his teeth and rose to prominence as a truly historic figure in our country, then you look at the John Curtin Hotel in a new way and you realise, wouldn't it be a tragedy if we lost a building like that with its important place in the social history and the heritage fabric of Melbourne. So I think there's some really innovative components to this. I'm really pleased and proud of the team we've got here at the City of Melbourne and the great work they do. And I thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, for your leadership role in this portfolio now, and to Councillor Leiloo as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for all of your work on this item. Are there any other speakers? Yes, Councillor Dr. Oldguest.
Thank you, Rashina. I'd like to reiterate, firstly, well done to B for coming in and giving us your input, and Stan as well, and also Rashina, Deputy Lord Mayor, your comments as well. Most, if not all, I think your comments regarding heritage I completely agree with. So why do I have some concerns? I think I'll start with the consultation process to the extent that I understand it, and then what we saw, those of us on council, and this was presented a few weeks ago, I think the highlight was what I think they called strategic consultation. And that's what concerns me, because from strategic consultation you can potentially direct outcomes. And then we were shown 6 bullet points of those who were consulted, and 2 of them were directly related to the Indigenous, that we consulted with the Indigenous organisations, and then the second one was with the broader Indigenous or Aboriginal community, which perhaps sounds reasonable, but and asked the question, why don't we consult with the broader community of Melbourne? Which is something that we're struggling to do here at the City of Melbourne from my observations in the last 12 plus months. We've made some recommendations of how we can do this better, but until that happens, I have to take some of these policies that we put forward with a grain of salt as to, is this truly what we want to see? My view, if you like, on society, those of us here in Melbourne and Australia, of course, we're a multicultural society and it's fantastic. But over a couple of generations, you'd like to think that we unite. We're not a group of different people. We're united and we think of ourselves as Aussies within a couple of generations. I'm not convinced there are tones. I think there are tones in this policy that isn't doing that. There is an emphasis on the Indigenous that is disproportionate to the numbers in the community. There's also, I'd call it a political element of climate change. It has its place, but this is meant to be a document about heritage and the people here who live in Melbourne, and it's meant to unite us. One thing it says in here, it says outright, Melbourne is an Aboriginal city. I'm not sure what that means and why it's in the document. Melbourne is made up of all of us. Melbourne started, 100. You're the history scholar, Nick. You'll be able to tell me, but only 200 years ago. There's some strange tones in this document. I absolutely agree. Heritage is important. We all want to celebrate it, including Indigenous heritage, but it's just one part of a great big whole. And the emphasis placed in this document makes me question what this document is truly trying to achieve. I think I want what people here have chosen to come and talk to this document and see the amendments. I think what Rashina was talking about is exactly what this document should reflect. But I think there are words in this document that need serious change, and I for one, don't think it's ready for release. So, yeah, well done to all, but I think there's more to go.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Guest. Are there any other speakers to the motion? No. Yes, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I want to thank Joe and the team for listening, because I remember the first time I looked at the first draft and now the version in front of us. We actually have made a lot of changes. So thank you. Thank you very much for listening to the comments that I have made and my colleagues have made. I do agree with Councillor Dr. Owen Guest that the consultation process could have been done better, but we can't undo what we did. So more discussions that we had in the last few weeks was very, very much appreciated. And I can see that in the document that in front of us now has included, obviously we do acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, but we also acknowledge the multicultural flavour in this city. And I totally agree with what Dr. Owen Guest said. I look at the statistics that the City of Melbourne has got more than 50% of people born overseas. We see Lygon Street, we see the Chinatown, the longest standing continuous Chinatown in the world. We also, if you go to the Queen Victoria Market, you know there are a lot of storeholders there, traders there. They are generations of migrants. So to have that statement there, I feel that, I don't know whether this is too late. Is it possible to have another amendment tonight?
Certainly not too late. It's open to any councillor with a seconder to move an amendment.
Well, if we can change, do that amendment for this statement there, instead of Melbourne is an Aboriginal city, I feel that Melbourne is a multicultural city.
So just to be clear, Councillor Liu, you're going to move an amendment. So do you want to provide the words of that amendment, and then you'll need a seconder?
Can we do that, please?
Yes. So with the council business team is standing by, ready for your words to be dictated out.
Yes. So a change. Melbourne is an Aboriginal city to Melbourne is a multicultural city.
Just to confirm, you're referencing page 34 of the document or page 39 of 110 as it might appear in front of you? Am I on the right
I'm looking
page?
at 39, page 39. Thank you.
Right, and do you have a seconder, Councillor Leilou? Oh, sorry, Councillor Liu. Councillor Camillo. We will now speak to this amendment. So over to you, Councillor Liu, to speak to your amendment.
As I have put it out there, I myself have been here 40 years, and when I come to the City of Melbourne, I see a lot of people coming from multicultural background, and we have the statistics telling us over half of our population were born overseas. And we also have a lot of not only the infrastructure with heritage, the traditional owners' heritage, but also a lot of the infrastructure also from multicultural communities, such as the oldest temple, the Siap Temple. If you have never been to, I invite you to go and have a look. It is really, really Chinese. And we also have the longest continuous standing Chinatown in Melbourne. We have Lygon Street, and we have many, many more. So I feel that to really represent the city of Melbourne, yes, we do acknowledge the traditional owners. We do treasure the heritage, but at the same time, I feel that if you look at the city of Melbourne, who is living here, who is working here, who is doing businesses here, and I would definitely feel that having the statement, Melbourne is a multicultural city, would suit much, much better.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. And to you, Councillor Camillo, a seconder.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Before I became a councillor, the City of Melbourne had a consultation about this heritage review. First of all, I'd like to thank the whole team that I think has a lot of time, a lot of work put in there. 90% of the things are in there, I agree, but in that case, being an immigrant, international student, me and Councillor Lelio, we both came from overseas. We are international students. I feel in the city of Melbourne that many times I'm not represented. That's how I feel. No one can change that for me. And today I'm very proud that Gladys could be brave to go and speak, because that's exactly how I feel. And every time we singleize one group to the other, we divide it. We divide it. When I moved in here in 2007, I didn't feel Australia was that divided. Currently, I feel that we just keeping segregate groups and you're keeping divided. We are a multicultural city. We embrace everyone. I never discriminate if you're Aborigine, Brazilian, short, black, tall. I'm just getting sick and tired. We need to unite it. And I think just little change in there just got to make us rethinking that we are all the same and we're here and we need to work together. So thank you, Gladys, for your bravery to just speak how you feel and support completely today. I think it's a minor change, but I'm not discredit the work that the whole team in the heritage put in here. Support, but I need to raise my voice in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. We have many other speakers to this amendment. The first one is the Lord Mayor.
Apologies. I have a point of order rather than a speak if I
yes, of course.
can,
yes.
Chair, which is just to clarify how we're proceeding with a number of different amendments, yes. Particularly in the context of Councillor Dr Ball's request earlier on to split. Understanding this is a bit on yes. things are moving quickly.
May I do this to assist? Could we put 10.1.2 in a different colour of text? So that is the amendment before us that we are going to debate and vote on first. The balance of the text, which is in blue, is the alternate motion as moved by me. and seconded by Councillor Liu. So what I'm proposing is this, that we will have the debate and the vote on 10.1.2. Then, at Councillor Dr Ball's request, we will vote, depending on what the motion then looks like, on the balance of the motion with a division of 10.2 as a separate vote to the rest of the motion. So that is how I'm proposing we proceed. But I'm now going to, if that satisfies you, Councillor Griffiths, resume the debate about the amendment. And I understand, Lord Mayor, you're about to speak to the amendment.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I could, before we proceed with further debate, could I ask a question?
Yes, you can ask a question at any time. But as Chair, I had given the floor to the Lord Mayor to speak, and he had commenced his remarks, so I might let him do that, and then there are other speakers and questions, as I understand it.
It may be germane to the further...
Sure, Councillor Dr Olivia Ball, if you're
I'm
happy to
happy to
cede the
cede-
floor.
I'm happy to cede
over
the
to
point
you,
if
Councillor Dr
Olivia
Olivia
Ball
Ball.
has a question.
Thank you both very much. I just wondered, my question is whether the proponent and seconder of this amendment would accept, instead of this, would accept Melbourne as an Aboriginal and multicultural city.
That is a question for you, Councillor Liu and Councillor Camillo.
Can I ask a question to you, Olivia Ball? Okay, can I ask a question?
Well, you can ask a question at any time, but I don't think Councillor Dr Ball's question has been answered yet. Do you need to ask a question in order to answer it? Okay. Yes, Councillor Camillo.
What's your intention to add that? If you can just explain your point in there, just for me to interpret why you're changing that, because I understood gladly the point, and I explained my point, and now you're adding that.
I felt you both argued very effectively for the status and recognition of Melbourne as a multicultural city. So could we combine the two rather than erase Aboriginal? Could the amendment instead state Melbourne is an Aboriginal and multicultural city?
No.
That's my suggested alternative. And would you accept
my
that?
interpretation of multicultural city englobes everyone. So
sorry, I might just ask Councillor Liu, who's the mover of the amendment, whether she's prepared to accept the wording proposed by Councillor Dr Ball.
I'm happy to have a mention of Aboriginal. Maybe I change it to Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a no from both parties. Is that correct?
Well, to the wording you proposed, as I understand. So is that correct, mover and seconder, that you do not agree with the wording proposed by Councillor Dr Ball? Yes, I think that is...
I'm happy to change it to...
I understand you're happy to change it to other wording, but I'm just confirming you don't...
No, correct.
But you would like to amend the wording further? That would be a fresh amendment, if I'm correct? That would be a fresh amendment. So we would first need to vote on this amendment. Yes, so the mover and the seconder could withdraw this amendment and move a different amendment. Is that what you would like to do? Yes? Yes, Councillor Camillo? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So, council business. I think you're going to change this slightly, so maybe we'll leave that wording on the screen. Councillor Liu, you now seek to move a different amendment. And did you want to dictate to council business the wording of that?
So, Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage.
I think so.
Okay. And you're the seconder of this amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
I accept that. Can I make a comment or not?
Well, we're now going to debate this amendment, so over to you, Councillor Liu, as the mover of this new amendment.
Well, the new statement states exactly how I feel. Melbourne is a multicultural city and we highly respect Aboriginal heritage.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Over to you, Councillor Camillo. You have a question. Okay, yes, but to you, Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just a question for Councillor Liu. Am I correct that we're changing the opening sentence of the paragraph that is titled Aboriginal Heritage and the Future of the City, and we're removing Aboriginal City from that? Is that correct? I just want to clarify that I'm looking at the right page and understanding the intent here.
There is no, I don't think there is anything inappropriate because the heading says Aboriginal heritage. So by changing it to Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage has no conflict with the subject line.
Thank you for answering that question, Councillor Liu. Now over to you, Councillor Camillo, as seconder of the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And now I support Councillor Glad's in this point because I think it's more inclusive, englobes everyone. We are a multicultural community. Only in the city of Melbourne, 50% that live in the CBD is Chinese descendant. So I'm not from here, has a lot of, so I think this helps us to unite it and not divide it. If anything's what it is in that context, and that I just want to explain to everyone, that's my interpretation from a person that migrated to this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Would any other councillors like to speak? Yes, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I can't vote for this amendment, and I think it's quite a far-reaching amendment, which actually deserves a lot of scrutiny, and certainly it's something that I could not vote for this evening. And let's try and clarify a couple of points here. To say that Melbourne is an Aboriginal city does not mean that we are saying it's not a multicultural city. Of course, Melbourne is a multicultural city, a wonderful multicultural city. When we talk about Melbourne being an Aboriginal city, what we are doing is acknowledging the fact that this city sits on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and it is an acknowledgement of their tens of thousands of years of connection to this place, an enduring connection to this place, and something that we continue to acknowledge to this modern day. Councillor Guest, you sort of asked a question about history. Indeed, Melbourne, as we now know it, was founded in 1835 with the arrival of John Batman, so about 190 years ago. But what we do know is that there was a long, long history in this place prior to 1835, a place known as Naarm. And by describing Melbourne as an Aboriginal city, we're acknowledging that long, long history and tradition. Importantly, in this heritage strategy, we do see an acknowledgement of that history in a way that hasn't been there in previous heritage strategic works that we've done in the past. And so in this context, it's perfectly appropriate. In fact, I must insist it's absolutely appropriate that you would include a reference to Melbourne being an Aboriginal city. Can I also say that the expression Melbourne is an Aboriginal city is something that appears in numerous documents across the city. That is a reflection of a lot of work that's been done by people at the City of Melbourne. It's a reflection of many, many hours of consultation with the community as well. And so for us to be sitting in this chamber tonight and just making a change of this consequence without going back to the people who have contributed so much and not being respectful for all the people that have done so much work as well on producing this document is something that I could not support. So I cannot support this amendment, and I hope that I do hope that it fails.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you, Gladys, for pointing out all the amazing, great things around Melbourne that Chinese migrants have brought to the city. In fact, Little Lon, the gin distillery, is now owned by a couple who is one half Chinese heritage as well. I strongly agree with the Lord Mayor's comments. Melbourne is a city of art, and that doesn't prevent Melbourne from being a city of sport. To say one thing is not at the exclusion of the other. And I think that is at the heart of the division that Councillor Camillo speaks to. If we are offended by that as a sentence, I think we've got far bigger issues than the issue on the table tonight. The Lord Mayor's maths is correct. 190 years ago, Melbourne, as we know it, was founded. And there is certainly archaeological evidence to suggest that there's been people in Victoria for 40,000 years. So if you can't do that maths quickly, that is 0.4 of 1%. Now, to make that maths a bit easier for you to remember, the movie Titanic is 190 minutes long. So 0.41% of that is the length of the famous car scene in Titanic. And in a document where we're speaking about history and heritage, that period of time makes a difference. And the time that we have had and the times we've seen and the history that the Indigenous people have brought and continue to share and talk about here in Melbourne, I think is highly vital that it retain its place in a paragraph titled Aboriginal Heritage, rather than us removing that instead. I think there's absolutely a time and a place to talk about the great multicultural things that we have, and there's certainly other parts of this document that speak to that, but to erase that portion and change that, I think, is highly inappropriate, and I can't support the amendment on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Rass. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Yes, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Rashina, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think the words on the following page betray what's been said by the Lord Mayor and Councillor Rouse. It says there, our priority, we will respect, etc. That says the City of Melbourne's priority. So we are prioritising the Indigenous. To prioritise any group over and above the rest of us isn't the way we build a strong, solid, functioning society. You say, Nick, that the term Melbourne as an Aboriginal city is used extensively. Yes, I'm sure there are a group of politicians and bureaucrats have been pushing this for the last 10 years or so. But it is getting to the point where people are pushing back. It is easy to respect the contributions made by the Indigenous, but to the degree and the proportionality that it's being pushed is now getting to the point where we feel others are being pushed aside. Those who came 192 years ago have contributed a lot and made Melbourne a significantly different place to what it was beforehand. Thus, the heritage that we're talking about, yes, it includes Indigenous, but boy, to prioritise it, wow, there's an awful lot that's happened in the last 192 years. And yet this document seems to prioritise the Indigenous. Melbourne is not an Indigenous city. Melbourne is Melbourne, made up of the likes of all of us here. I'm sorry, I think... And why does this matter? This matters because it leads to prioritising one group of people means you start creating jobs for those sort of people. And they might be created and only talked about in closed sessions. So there's a transparency issue. One thing leads to the next. That's why I have a problem with this document. In fact, as much as I respect the amendment you've tried to make, Gladys, I'd say it doesn't go far enough.
Just a question, if I can clarify.
Yes, Councillor Guest, I was going to give the floor to Councillor Griffiths, who I believe has a question.
A question for Councillor Guest,
and then I will
which
come to you,
might be
Councillor
helpful. Councillor Guest, when you were speaking of the section entitled Our Priority, which follows on page 40, following on from the page 39 that we're amending, that appears to me to be the same as other pages entitled Our Priority relating to other things that we're doing, which I presume are sitting equally alongside each other, not, as you suggest, prioritising this area.
Is that a question?
I believe it is being asked as a question. I don't think Councillor Griffiths is intending to use his speaking time, so yes, I think that is a question.
Thank you. The key here is we're prioritising a group of people as opposed, it doesn't say also we're we can't, if you prioritise a group of people, you are by definition not prioritising another group of people.
I think so, Councillor Griffiths' question was different. His question was that our priority appears after every area. So the following area then has an our priority explaining that that's about cultural groups. So I think his question to you was our priority is used consistently after each section of the document.
The way it comes through, we are elevating. My point is we are elevating a group of people here over and above others.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guest. Councillor Rouse, did you have a question?
My question was along the same lines. It was just confirming that Councillor Guest was aware that there is a list of priorities after the multicultural section that follows that on page 44 of 110.
The point is we are elevating a group of people over and above others. When you speak of multiculturalism, we should all be equal. That isn't what's coming through in this document.
So I'll take that as a no.
Okay. Okay. We have a series of questions. So I'm just going to try and distinguish between the questions and the people who wish to speak to the amendment. Are there any other councillors who wish to ask a question at this point? And you do as well. Okay, Councillor Scott and then Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm failing to see the words...
Who is this a question of, Councillor?
Councillor Guest.
Okay.
I'm failing to see the words in the section marked our priority, any reference to the words we will prioritise a particular group of people or we will elevate or any other word you choose to use. Can you point out the exact wording so that you can support the view that we are prioritising a particular segment of the community?
Mark, it says quite clearly, our priority, we will respect the knowledge and authority of traditional owners regarding the municipality's Aboriginal cultural heritage. When you combine that with Melbourne as an Aboriginal city and the pages and pages where it draws reference to the Indigenous as opposed to the other peoples of Melbourne, it is a clear message.
Sure. Again, I'll just reinforce the question that's previously been asked. The words our priority is a heading. It's not a verb or an action. It's a heading that says our priority, just like it says on every other page.
Councillor Scott?
So I'm just, again, asking Councillor Guest to point out where does it say we will prioritise the Indigenous community?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I hear your question. That question has been answered previously by Councillor Guest, so I am going to move to the next question, which I understand is from Councillor Laidlaw.
Thank you. My question is to the Lord Mayor. So, Lord Mayor, you just talked about the fact that the Aboriginal community and everything. Given that it is Chinese New Year and given that the Chinese community have made such a big contributions and also been taken advantage of within Australia, are you then saying that when you go to Chinese New Year on the celebration on Sunday, that you're going to be saying, based on your remark that you just said, that the Aboriginal community is more important than the Chinese Australian community?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I am now going to move to, are these further questions, councillors?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Councillor Rouse and then Councillor Camillo.
Thank you. Question to Councillor Guest. The next section, which speaks to a multicultural city, opens with the phrase, Melbourne is a diverse city with a rich migrant history. Are you confident that that reconciles with your earlier comments? Or does that create a self-conflicting document here that needs to go back to the drawing board?
As I've said, it's a question of proportionality. The number of times the Indigenous are mentioned in this document compared to other is disproportionate to their status within our community. There are about 600, I think, Indigenous in Melbourne out of 190,000.
A heritage document.
Yeah.
Councillors, I'm going to remind you we're not going to use questions of other councillors to have a de facto debate, but Councillor Camillo, did you have a question?
I have a question for Councillor Olivia Ball. Councillor, which question do you think, which phrase do you think is more inclusive?
Sorry, Councillor Camillo, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball hasn't spoken to this amendment, so I'm not clear on why you're asking her a question.
Because she asked to move.
That
before.
amendment was withdrawn. We're now debating a fresh amendment.
Okay. So I ask it to the Lord Mayor because he making a statement. Can I ask to him?
Yes, but I remind you this is a question, not
Is
de
a
facto
question,
debate. Yes.
and I have a question.
Okay, Councillor Camillo.
Lord Mayor, which phrase do you think is more inclusive? Melbourne is Aboriginal. Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage, or Melbourne is an Aboriginal city? Which of those phrases you think is more inclusive?
Camillo, I'm not going to allow that question.
Why not?
Because the Lord Mayor is not the mover or the seconder of this amendment. He is just a participant in the debate. You've had an opportunity to speak to this amendment. You're the seconder of it.
Point of order.
Yes.
Chair, you allowed you allowed Councillor Andrew Rouse ask Councillor Dr. Owen Guest a question before.
After, in respect of the remarks he had made, asking about his interpretation of the document, while, as I understand it, Councillor Camillo is just asking the Lord Mayor for his personal view. Are you asking for an interpretation of the document?
I want just an interpretation because I have an interpretation like for the
Okay.
for
Could
this.
you rephrase
moment.
your question to
My
the Lord
question
Mayor as an
is-
interpretation of the document?
Lord Mayor, which phrase do you think is more inclusive? Melbourne is Aboriginal city or Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage? Which one do you think is more inclusive?
So I don't accept the premise of that question. It's not a binary one or the other. We can be both. And that's the way we approach these things in Melbourne.
So can I ask the same question? The only person can ask is Owen Guest because it was involved
Councillor
in
Camillo, I'm not going to allow the use of the question provision of the government's rules to be used to ask each councillor their view on a matter. We are debating an amendment that you are the seconder of that is up on the screen before us now. Are there any other questions before I now call for other speakers to the amendment? No other questions. All right. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Yes, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm keenly aware that we are all settler migrants debating this issue with no First Nations representatives available to speak for themselves. I don't expect to be able to persuade anyone here or change their minds, but it must be said that First Nations people have a special status. We are all equal, but it cannot be denied, and I think this does go towards denying, and the comments we've heard tonight do definitely deny, that First Nations have a special status in this country and every other settler colonial country which has surviving First Nations. The idea that because First Nations people in this place that were once 100% of the population, since effectively from the beginning of time, certainly from the beginning and way before the beginning of history, the idea that people who were once 100% of the population are now a very small fraction of the population should be used against them.
Point of order.
Is
Camilla, you're saying point of
profoundly
order?
flawed as an argument. I'm not asking a question, I'm debating the matter.
Sorry, Councillor Camillo.
I was not
Councillor
allowed
Camillo,
to be
Councillor
debating
Camillo.
before.
No, Councillor Camillo, you did debate this amendment. You're the seconder and you spoke to it. And now Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball is speaking to the amendment before us. Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball, please continue.
Thank you. A very profound finding was made last year, I think it was, by the Yurruk Justice Commission. Very profound, applying the word genocide to the state of Victoria. Genocide means a number of different things in international law. It's not just mass killing, but it is in so many ways a form of erasure. And to use that history of genocide in Victoria to further erase Aboriginal people and traditional owners is profoundly wrong. We are, as an organisation, filling out what we understand by the statement, Melbourne is an Aboriginal city. We have a department called Aboriginal Melbourne, and it is doing important work, developing a First Nations strategy and addressing with the Aboriginal people of this city that exact question. What does it mean today to be an Aboriginal city? And we will take our guidance rightly from them. This new phrasing, which acknowledges Aboriginal heritage, and some of the comments used in proposing this implied that we have to consider the people living, working and doing business here, and relegating Aboriginal people to a matter of heritage is to deny that Aboriginal people are living, working and doing business in this city. Are they proportionally few? Yes. Is that a profound disgrace and crime of history? Yes. When we are welcomed by First Nations, by traditional owners to this place, that is a profound statement that we are welcome, those of us who are not First Nations, those of us who are settlers and descended from them. We are welcomed over and over again by the traditional owners, and I thank them very deeply for that welcome. But Aboriginal people are not just any other culture. Multicultural Melbourne, multicultural Australia, something we affirm and celebrate in this government every day, refers to everyone other than the First Nations and their special status, which can never be changed, which can never be eroded. They were here first, and not just the ship before ours, but for tens of thousands of years, and we rely on them and their history to be able to survive in this place, and I hope in the future to continue to survive through their knowledge of country, their generosity in sharing knowledge with us, and their welcome here. I will not be supporting this alteration to the recommendation from management.
Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm genuinely at a bit of a loss that we're sitting here having this debate tonight on a document that has undergone so much work, and I do want to thank at the beginning officers who've just put in so much effort to bring this document to us. And I think it was touched on in one of the very first questions that Councillor Rouse asked, which was to clarify at what page in the document this amendment was, and the page is page 34. And I think it says something about the fact that it takes until page 34 of the document to first of all make the point that Melbourne is an Aboriginal city, and it also speaks to the mindset of people who want to remove that from any point in the document, from removing it from page 34. It's amazing to me that we're having to have this conversation, not just because of the fact that we know the damage, we know the hurt that these kinds of debates have to so many people in our community, but also that we know so clearly what the people of Melbourne think on issues like this, because we've seen recent referendum, we've seen the responses of people who live here, and we know that there's a desire to embrace First Nations culture and to be grateful for the welcome to country that we receive, as Councillor Dr. Ball was saying, exactly how we commenced our start of the year with one of those. The fact that when we were discussing the priorities, that the key words that were cited as being the difficulty with our priority bit were respect for knowledge of traditional owners regarding the Aboriginal heritage in the area. Respect seems like such a low bar. Respecting the knowledge and authority of traditional owners regarding the municipality's Aboriginal cultural heritage. Respect for that. We can't even get agreement amongst 11 councillors that that's a reasonable thing by the sounds of things. I will absolutely not be supporting this amendment. I reject it entirely, and I am firmly committed that phrase, Melbourne is an Aboriginal city, should remain in the document.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm not going to talk to the issues of Aboriginal heritage specifically. I think it's been very well covered by Councillor Ball, Councillor Griffiths and others. I just want to apologise to the community for, I guess, the unprofessionalism and the embarrassment I feel right now that we have had this document in our possession for a number of hours, if not days. It's been worked on for many months, and we come to a meeting today and start editing the document, changing words here and there, picking out something that we don't like. I just feel that that is such an unprofessional approach to such an important document that encompasses thousands of years of history and therefore thousands of years of heritage. So therefore to say a certain section is disproportionate, as Councillor Griffiths says, given it's on page 39, it does acknowledge the many thousands of years of Aboriginal ownership of this land versus the hundreds or tens of years that migrants have contributed to this country and this land as well. So to say that this section is disproportionate is completely false and ridiculous. And again, I just apologise to the community who are listening at home tonight or are here in the room that they have to listen to editorial sort of policy on the fly from this council, and under no circumstances will I be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Leiloo.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I think we keep forgetting the fact that this is a document on that is supposed to help us with planning, and also the idea that we're supposed to make the process a lot better. And I think the team and I worked on it. There are definitely a lot of stuff I don't agree with it, but compromise is a key word that I have actually done. But now we are using this as a de facto, debate, which I think could be potentially for another time. But nevertheless, I do think it's an important one. When we talked about, I didn't really want to have this, debate on this particular document. But I think given that, we're talking about, changing, well, we don't agree in that, prioritising one areas of work is more important than the other. But yeah, in this case, we are actually pretty much prioritising certain areas or work over the others. I didn't prioritise particular based on heritage or based on different groups. I particularly focused on prioritising the fact that there is a demand or a need from applicants, and also the fact that this could actually streamline the process. But yeah, here we are having a debate about this. I do think it's important, but potentially that we do need to have that conversation, probably not tonight. So I asked the team, but I do think that's an important one. We go back because I think the comments were saying, well, it is like, for example, the Chinese New Year, and, to say, well, when the Chinese migrants came here, they weren't welcomed with open arms. They were welcomed with discrimination. They were welcomed with all of that. Now, where is that kind of, being put in that documents in the places, right? No, but the Chinese community went through it, right? And to your point, Lord Mayor, when you just said, well, okay, I do acknowledge the fact that there's Aboriginal community that has contributed, but so has many others. If anything, through blood and sweat, and and unfairness, and also inequality. But to kind of really say, then completely to say, don't support a multicultural city, which Melbourne is obviously, you can have both, right? You don't have to need to have one or the other. You can have both. And I just find the fact that we have to debate this now is it's a detriment to the team. I know we've made these changes. I was hoping that we can have a very easy go through it because that's how we do things. But yet we are now having these debates about this particular one. And for me, I'm even, if this I knew this was going to get to this point, I wouldn't even bother seconding it, right? Because I would have said actually to the point, there's no point about having why we're having this. This is a separate fight. I hope there's no more changes. I hope there's no more things because I want to leave my other remarks for other time. But can we please just get through this document and let's just keep on voting on it. I think people can have their different views, and I do think that potentially we are going through our annual plan, our annual budget. Let's make Aboriginal Melbourne and Aboriginal a particular focus of City of Melbourne, and where its status within City of Melbourne, a key point to which then all of us councillors can have to fight or debate or input into it, so that we don't have to actually go through in this one.
Thank you, Councillor Leilua. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? No. Then I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
Sorry, can I just remind
this is just the amendment is the text in red at 10.1.2.
So Melbourne is a multicultural city respecting Aboriginal heritage. Yeah, okay.
All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Leilua, Councillor Guest, Councillor Liu. All those against, please raise your hand. Councillor Rouse, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball, Councillor Campbell, Lord Mayor, Councillor Louis, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths. That amendment has failed.
Deputy Lord Mayor, can I request of governance to note my objection for removing Aboriginal from the Aboriginal heritage section of the document in the minutes, please?
The Director of Governance tells me that is done. We now resume debate of the substantive motion before you. Is there anyone who has not yet spoken to the substantive motion? So we've returned to the original substantive motion that wishes to speak to the motion. The substantive motion. Just one moment, Councillor Dr. Libby Ball. Councillor Liu has... Their amendment, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball. This is an alternate motion. The text in blue is in blue just for the benefit of those in the chamber and at home, so they can see the distinction between the papers as released on at the end of last week and what is before us. So there is no debate about an amendment. We're now
To
debating.
rephrase my question, could we debate we've decided, I think, and you've accepted the request that there be two votes?
That's correct. So under
could we
rule-
debate whether the blue text should be added as one vote?
No, we could not debate that, but we can, under the governance rules, separate the motion. So I'm proposing that when we come to a vote, as I understood it was your request, Councillor Dr Olivia Ball, that 10.2 would be separated from the balance of the motion for a vote. So I have noted that request. Are there any other councillors?
Can I ask a point of order question, perhaps for governance? Deputy
Yes,
Lord Mayor?
please for governance.
When we split a motion for voting, does that mean we also split the debate, or single debate, vote back to back?
Over to you, Director of Governance.
Sorry, through you, Deputy Lord Mayor, you don't split the debate, it's the motion.
Thank you for that advice. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No, Councillor Liu, I'm just confirming whether you've previously spoken to the substantive motion. Councillor Liu, and then Liu. Councillor Liu, the minutes record that you did speak to the substantive motion. As you might recall, you put your hand up to speak to it, and in the course of your speaking remarks, you then asked to be able to move an amendment. So each councillor can speak to a motion once. You did speak to this motion when I called for speakers to the motion. You put your hand up, you spoke, and then during the course of your remarks, you asked for an amendment. So the minutes show you have already spoken to this motion. Are there any councillors who have not yet spoken to the substantive motion who wish to do so? Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, I think enough has been said already. I'll just take my time because I think we've lost in all of this process how much hard work's gone into this from the officers here at the City of Melbourne. So just pass on my thank yous for the continued opportunities that we've had for feedback throughout that entire process. And I think it's been a fantastic outcome that these sorts of things are being considered and the types of stories that are being documented. And as the Lord Mayor said before, the different types of heritage that will be continue to be protected. So thank you very much for all the hard work that's gone into it.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Are there any other speakers to the motion? No. I am briefly going to exercise my right of reply as the mover on a very brief point, and that is the question of consultation about the heritage strategy. And I think it is important to do that, given that we have heard somehow that consultation was somehow targeted or limited to a strategic consultation or focused on particular groups. I think to let that remark rest would not reflect the work that has occurred in relation to this heritage strategy. For anyone who's read the papers, it is set out very clearly, but I am going to use a moment to say it in this chamber. I'm going to read from the public papers. The consultation was far-reaching. Activities occurred at various times and locations to ensure many opportunities for participation. Consultation activities were a mix of in-person and online. Stakeholders included the general community. There was targeted engagement with business owners, with families, with parents, with peak bodies from areas of planning, heritage and urban design, and university students. It goes on to say, the consultation had over 4,900 views. The survey received 341 responses. It was one of the highest participation numbers of engagement in a heritage project in recent years. I do think it is important to put on the record that in addition to the excellent work on the strategy document, there was significant work to make sure that the consultation was far-reaching, that the full breadth of the municipality was heard from. And so I want to take a moment, in addition to my previous thanks, to thank the team for that. I think that wide-reaching consultation is well reflected in the document. And with that, I'm going to put this motion to the vote in two parts. Council business, is it possible to split 10.2 out first for a vote? Thank you. So councillors will first be voting on what was previously 10.2 on the previous screen. This is at the request of Councillor Dr Ball and Councillor Liu. All those in favour of this clause of the substantive motion, please raise your hands. That is Councillor that is Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Lei-Lu, Councillor Campbell, Lord Mayor, Councillor Louis and Councillor Scott. All those against. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Liu and Councillor Dr Olivia Ball, and is that Dr Guest has abstained. In those circumstances, this has passed. I'll now put the balance of the motion to the vote. Thank you, Council Business, for your dexterity in this. I'm now putting this part of the motion to the vote. Councillors, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Camillo. Councillor, is that a hand? No? That's not a hand. Councillor Rouse, Councillor Dr Olivia Ball, Councillor Lei-Lu, Councillor Campbell, Lord Mayor, Councillor Louis, Councillor Scott and Councillor Griffiths. All those against. Councillor Liu and Councillor Dr Guest. And I note Councillor Camillo is abstaining. That motion has passed. And with that, I ask the Lord Mayor to resume the role of Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor, for some excellent chairing there of what was a complex debate. If you need to have a rest, please feel free. It was absolutely excellent. All right, let's move on to roads, rates, rubbish and cleaning. Agenda item 6.4, Melbourne Cleaning and Graffiti Management Outcomes and Next Steps. I believe councillors would like a presentation in relation to this item, so we're going to ask Vince Macalino, Director of Waste and Recycling, to please make a brief presentation.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up there. So maybe while we bring up the presentation, I'm happy to explain the purpose of tonight's presentation, which is to inform councillors of the action taken by management in response to the council resolution at FMC on the 18th of February 2025 regarding item 6.1, Melbourne Cleaning and Graffiti Management Outcomes and Next Steps. We can move to the next slide, please, or we'll go one more. Thank you. At the Future Melbourne Committee meeting on the 18th of February 2025, Council requested that management explore various ways to improve how graffiti is managed and enforced. The Council resolution was split into two sections. Part 1 focused on the delivery of partnerships, collaborative approaches to graffiti management and the formation of a M9 graffiti management working group, with Part 2 focused on legal avenues to support cost recovery, advocacy and the introduction of a spray you pay approach to graffiti management. Next slide. The first resolution was to form a partnership with the City of Yarra, which has been delivered and commenced in May of 2025. A key priority was to improve how graffiti was managed while improving the presentation across our shared borders. The partnership includes the removal of graffiti and illegally bill posters. Since the commencement of the program, over 550 service requests have been completed, 4,400 square metres of graffiti has been removed from a range of residential, commercial and third-party owned assets. With a focus on partnership with state government agencies, officers have established a memorandum of understanding with Vic Roads for council to remove graffiti from traffic signal boxes. This has been structured as a 100% cost recovery model. An ongoing complex challenge for both council and the community we serve has been identifying and removing graffiti from third-party asset owners and arterial roadways. With over 400 service requests per annum to remove graffiti from assets owned by the Department of Transport and Planning and VicTrack, a clear focus has been on developing a MOU for collaborative approach to graffiti removal and an alignment of service levels. This has led to several trials in collaboration with Metro Trains and VicTrack to facilitate graffiti removal along Flinders Street and the Banana Alley Vaults. While these trials were a success, negotiations continue with VicTrack to create an improved service model that sees graffiti removed faster and in line with the service levels set by the City of Melbourne. The City of Melbourne sees this as an opportunity to improve the overall presentation of Melbourne where our assets and areas of management are intertwined. We have had positive discussions with the Department of Transport and Planning and are currently negotiating a memorandum of understanding, and this agreement is going to focus on expediting the required time it takes to get a permit for graffiti removal to align with our service levels. Currently, it can take up to or more than 28 days to receive a permit to remove graffiti. Improve collaboration through the creation of a pre-approval process, which will give us access to do that immediately. And ensure that costs are recovered or offset for the removal of graffiti on assets owned by the City of Melbourne, not owned by the City of Melbourne, where council removes the graffiti. This coincides with the recent action by the newly formed M9 Graffiti Management Working Group as part of this council resolution, which Melbourne is leading. The M9 have endorsed a coordinated advocacy position to DTP regarding the current timeframes and costs associated with obtaining occupancy permits and the timely removal of graffiti. This has led to the discussions with DTP for graffiti removal trial to commence along some of Melbourne's borders with other M9 councils in mid this year. Furthermore, the M9 Working Group has developed a comprehensive data pack incorporating service level agreements, budget information and removal rate performance. This data set will inform the strategic review of an aligned services, particularly focusing on procurement and supporting advocacy efforts to the state government. And everything that I've just mentioned will now become part of our BAU practice in how we deliver our graffiti management service and look to improve the presentation of assets out of council's direct control. Next slide. So, in line with part 2 of the resolution, I'm pleased to report back to council. Now we have a spray you pay approach to graffiti management. This new agreement with the Department of Justice and Community Safety will see individuals convicted of crimes, including graffiti-related offences within the City of Melbourne, when directed by a court to complete their corrections orders within the City of Melbourne, supporting council's spray you pay approach to graffiti management. These type of corrections orders aim to balance punishment with rehabilitation. These programs allow offenders to develop new skills and participate in purposeful work under strict supervision, which can have lasting positive effects by reducing reoffending and in this case could lead to reduced graffiti. Furthermore, in supporting the community, a set of frequently asked questions and a guide to completing a victim impact statement has been uploaded on council's website for private property owners. In addition to this, council has recently contacted victims of graffiti to advise them of the upcoming court proceedings and how to seek compensation by providing victim impact statements, and where all this information can be found on our website. In playing an active role in supporting Victoria Police with 2 active cases, council has submitted 2 victim impact statements that are seeking prosecution for well-known graffiti-related crimes. And management will continue to play an active role in this space ongoing. Next slide. As outlined in the resolution, advocacy is an important element as to how council will approach graffiti management and seek to recover costs. Key advocacy action by the Lord Mayor to various ministers has supported and helped establish the agreement with the Department of Justice and Community Safety. It has also led to the Department of Transport and Planning taking action to remove graffiti along City Road in December, and now the ongoing negotiations of a permanent agreement with the Department of Transport and Planning. Advocacy efforts will continue to be our primary focus of management as we prepare an advocacy plan off the back of the recent council endorsed plan. This will also be in collaboration with the M9 councils. Next slide. In summary, so in addition to the actions and outcomes achieved as part of this resolution, we will continue to monitor the top taggers with relevant data provided to Victoria Police. We'll seek to recover the costs of graffiti removal and report on this through the annual plan and budget process. We'll continue to have regular meetings with Victoria Police to identify upcoming graffiti-related cases where council can supply evidence or victim impact statements. We'll work closely with Corrections Victoria to prioritise graffiti offenders to undertake their corrections orders within the municipality of Melbourne, look to establish new agreements and memorandums of understanding with third-party asset owners and stakeholders, and issue unsightly premises notices in accordance with the local law requirements. This sums up the actions taken and the next steps as part of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince, for that presentation, and thanks for the excellent work of your team. I think there is some questions from councillors. Councillor Philip Leilu.
Sure. Is there any part around educational piece? So, for example, I do note that, there are certain offenders when, they do get a tour of, the damage that they've done, or especially, I guess, with some of the kind of the racist community where they just go, well, I think it was the Jewish community where they got them to go through the synagogues to say, how their comments and everything have been quite hurtful and everything. I'm just wondering, I know you do have the different options, but is there an educational piece where we do get the offenders who kind of tag and everything to whether it be VicPol kind of suggesting or somewhere where we actually do get them to say, look, this is the damage you've done, kind of a rehabilitation educational piece rather than kind of going through that. I just couldn't really see it, or maybe I'm confused in there, but if you can just comment if we have explored that or if we are.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Leilu, and through you, Lord Mayor. Great question, and that would be something we'll pick up through the work we do with Corrections Victoria and through the rehabilitation program there, and understanding, to your point, the damage that graffiti does. One part further to that, where we have done education, is within the schools. We've ran a 2-year program where we've delivered an education program to a variety of schools within our municipality, focused on the damage and particularly the grief that graffiti can cause. Thank you.
Quick question from me, Vince. We recently introduced Snap, Send, Solve at the City of Melbourne. Can you tell us what the first couple of weeks and months have looked like with that available to the public?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Snap, Send, Solve has been a good inclusion to our graffiti removal process. It has reduced duplicated work orders. So what that means is when someone reports the same work order as someone else within the community, that creates a large administrational burden to sort through. That's been reduced by over 40% since that started. So that allows more significant time for our service provider to actually be removing the graffiti where it is. In addition to that, we've seen our customer service satisfaction rating go up by over 10%, which is now at 88%, and our customer service score at 4.7 out of 5, which is excellent. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Well done. All right, any other questions for Vince? Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Vince, can you please clarify to the public, because you have 2 ways that you report. You just mentioned, Lord Mayor, was very welcome question about Snap and Send Solve, but what's the other way that the public usually reports to? And if you can remind the QR codes in the bins and around town, please.
Thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor. The 2 ways to report at the moment are through Snap, Send, Solve, or alternatively, our QR codes, which are located throughout the city on all of our bins. In addition to the QR codes, reports can be made via our website. There's a link there to report an issue, which will take you through to graffiti. Both very effective ways, and we'll get the response within those SLAs that we've set within our graffiti management contract, which is up there with one of the best in the world.
Excellent. All right, any further questions for Vince? Thank you very much for the presentation. I now call on Tony Penner from the mighty South Bank Residents Association, who requested the opportunity to address the committee on this matter.
Firstly, to our Chinese councillors and our Chinese community in South Bank, which is quite large, Gong Xi Fa Chai. I wish to acknowledge the substantial work undertaken by management in establishing memoranda of understanding with neighbouring municipalities, state government agencies and transport asset holders. The coordinated approach with the City of Yarra, the M9 councils, Vic Roads, Vic Track, Metro Trains and the Department of Justice and Community Safety represents a constructive and pragmatic response to what is a complex and multi-jurisdictional challenge. You establish the establishment of the You Spray You Pay principle and the strengthened partnership with DJCS to prioritise offenders undertaking corrections orders within the municipality are particularly welcome initiatives. Cost recovery and visible accountability are important signals to the community. However, while these strategic partnerships are positive, I would respectfully submit that Council must ensure it does not lose focus on performance within our own municipality boundaries. Many residents and ratepayers continue to experience persistent tagging in high foot traffic areas, slow response times to non-offensive graffiti, repeated vandalism in the same locations without long-term mitigation strategies, a perception that some areas of the municipality receive inconsistent levels of attention. It is important that while Council engages externally, advocating to state government, negotiating MOUs and developing regional working groups, we simultaneously demonstrate measurable improvements on the ground within the municipality of City of Melbourne itself. In particular, I would encourage Council to publicly report suburb-level data on graffiti removal times and repeat offender locations, prioritise proactive removal in high visibility gateways and residential precincts, not solely reactive service requests, strengthen communication with residents regarding how and when reported graffiti will be addressed, ensure that cost recovery agreements with third-party asset holders do not result in delayed removal while jurisdictional matters are negotiated. Melbourne's reputation as a clean, safe and well-managed city underpins economic activity, residential confidence and visitor experience, while street art remains an important and celebrated part of Melbourne's identity, particularly in locations such as Hosier Lane. Unmanaged tagging and offensive graffiti have a very different community impact. The report correctly identifies the social consequences of a poorly presented environment. Perceptions of neglect can quickly undermine feelings of safety and civic pride. For residents living with repeated tagging near their homes, this is not an abstract policy discussion. It is a daily lived experience. Accordingly, I support the recommendations of this report, but urge the committee to maintain a strong emphasis on service standards, transparency and visible outcomes within our own municipality. Strategic partnerships are important, advocacy is important, cost recovery is important, but ultimately residents judge success by what they see, or ideally what they no longer see on their streets. As you're well aware, I've been forthcoming with highlighting deficiencies within the current services delivery time and time again to this community. I have mentioned this in this forum in the past many a times. We need to also get our own backyard in order. I am still experiencing significant anomalies with my dealings, stuff that's claimed to have gone, but it's still there. This is an outcome after some graffiti I reported. Admittedly, it was addressed quickly, but why
Tony,
is it so hard to address
has
it properly?
lapsed. I'll ask you to move to your conclusion.
No, that's fine. This is it. It takes no more effort, just a willingness to want to do the job properly. I am still having issues with reports as marked action complete when they're not.
All right, thank you, Tony, and thank you for your own activism in this area. Some very good suggestions in that submission, which I know I can see Vince nodding, will be taken on board. You can, Councillor Camillo.
Tony, when you make your requests, are you using, do you save the reference number and you make the same complaint under the same reference number? Like, for example, you open the first request, for example, a bin next to your house that never been collected. And then just keeping escalating. Do you use the same reference number or not?
No, I don't report things twice. Basically, that's what you're saying. It doesn't get actioned. Eventually, bins is not a good example because
the bins was not a good example.
It could be graffiti. It could be graffiti. Yeah. I make the report once.
Yeah.
And I do intend to speak with Rick Cusack separately to this.
Yeah.
Again about these issues because you guys don't need to hear about it. I'll make the report once and then I'll chase it. I'll say, Rick, it's said that it's been fixed. I can take you down there. It's still there. Nothing's changed. That's the frustration. They say that they've solved it, but it's not solved.
Okay,
So I'm going to exercise my discretion here and ask that we limit questions and we move to debate. But thank you for the points you've made.
Yep.
And please feel free to pick up the discussion with
So feel
Tony
free,
afterwards.
after twice report, you can copy me in an email because I would like to investigate you. Thank you.
Right. Great. Thank you. All right, let's move on. We have an amended motion that I believe is going to be put before us.
I'm going to be the mover, but I'd like to move some amendments. Lord Mayor, please.
Yep, let's just see that government business bring up that amended motion. Just double check that's the right one.
Yep.
Yep, I believe that is it. Councillor Camillo, looking to you
Yes,
as the
correct,
mover. Yes,
Lord
that's
Mayor. Yep.
So moved. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu. Back to you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the entire team from Vince, and also the collaboration from Jim Robinson within the topic of graffiti. That's from safety team. And of course, Councillor Gladys Liu, that for her continued support. So since this committee last considered the matter in February last year, we have been substantial progress driven through strategic partnership and coordinate working groups. Our memorandum of understanding with the City of Yarra and Vic Roads are enhancing alignment on service delivery standards, simplify approval process, and improving cost recovery outcomes. This work is further supported by the establishment of the AIM9 Graffiti Management Working Group, which has developed consistent standards, shared data, and endorsed of coordinated advocacy positions to the state government through the Department of Transport and Planning. And thank you to our CEO to be helping and support us to make this happen. In addition to our memorandum of understanding established with the Department of Justice and Community Safety, is particularly significant as it prioritizes graffiti offenders to complete community corrections order with the City of Melbourne, reinforce the you spray, you pay principle. In fact, council officers have already contacted several businesses to assist in the development of victim impact statements, and officers have also assisted Victoria Police with evidence as part of the ongoing prosecutions. But this important work continues, and ongoing negotiations are underway with several other agents, including DGP, Department of Transport and Planning, VicTrack, Metro Trains, and Yarra Trains. Once again, the importance of partnership in governance. This is all part of the process that real change will come in time, and that's why I have moved these amendments to make sure and safeguard we're going to the right direction. Collectively, all these initiatives are about improving service efficiency, strengthening cost recovery efforts, and generally enhance the appearance and amenity of your city. And of course, getting the basic right. And I hope these amendments can also address a little bit of the education part that Councillor Lelio mentioning here. And Tony, you told we need constantly, in one of them in his report, investigating innovative funding mechanism to strengthen resource for enhanced cleaning graffiti removal. Is a constantly evolution to improve. I know we have some problems in there, but I think we need to keep working, and that's what we're aiming here. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I want to thank Councillor Camillo for this motion tonight. And I also want to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to the officers for their work in this area. It is not an easy job at all, but this is very important. So thank you, guys. The report before us tonight provides a great summary of all the activities undertaken in the past year since we last considered this item. And it's encouraging to see the significant progress that has been made. So thank you again. I'm especially pleased to note the high level of collaboration supporting this work. MOUs with the City of Yarra, Vic Roads, and the Department of Justice and Community Safety are great examples of what can be achieved when government agencies work together. And like Councillor Camillo said, there are a lot of work, more work that we can do. So, as part of this work, I look forward to hearing the outcomes of continued discussions with Yarra Trams and how graffiti is managed and removed at tram stops within the municipality. So, all of this definitely will help to make sure Melbourne remains clean, vibrant, and welcoming to all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Liu. Would other councillors like to speak to this item I'll speak to it very briefly and just say I want to thank Councillor Camillo and Councillor Liu, Vince and all the team. When I think about the things that we've made real progress on as a council in this term, this sits right at the top of the list. The city is looking cleaner, and that hasn't happened by chance. It hasn't happened by magic. It's because there's a lot of hard work, effort and focus that is going into lifting standards here at the city. And, you know, it's something that I'm hearing all the time now from people telling us that they think the city is looking cleaner, and that customer satisfaction rate of 88%. It's not 100%, that's where we need to get to, but we are in a much better position to where we were. And while the city is a lot cleaner, I also I'll be the first to acknowledge we've still got a way to go to get it to the standards that we expect here in Melbourne, but we are definitely on the right trajectory. I also get a lot of very positive feedback about our 1 hour removal policy for racist and hateful material. I think that has been a great initiative here at the city, and so well done to the team that are responsible for delivering on that. I think this progress report paints a very good picture. I think there's some things we need to continue to lean in on and focus effort, particularly around victim impact statements and just looking at how we can take a more activist approach on that front to ensure that when we say you spray, you pay, we mean it. I also want to speak in favour of the amendments that are here in this motion. I think we've done a great job in engaging government agencies, major property owners and others in our efforts to clean up the city. And what we see here is the identification of new groups of stakeholders and organisations to bring into the mission with us. In particular, I want to call out the identification of major asset owners, but in particular, our business and resident associations. Our business precinct associations do a brilliant job in our city. They're part of the democratic infrastructure of our city, and now to specifically be reaching out to them and the residents associations to engage with us in the effort of cleaning up graffiti, I think could deliver real dividends. You know, I think here of the ugly spectacle of when you drive down a high street, one of our beautiful heritage high streets, and you see the tagging on the second story above the awnings, when you see horrible tagging on the sun covers and the shades there. And I'm hopeful that by engaging our business precinct associations in our efforts to clean up the graffiti around the city, we might be able to get some terrific new results on that score. So looking forward to see what we happen there. And similarly with our resident associations as well, bringing them into our fight against graffiti, I think should deliver real results. And to the extent that we can investigate innovative funding mechanisms, you know, it's not easy, it's not cheap to run a cherry picker down a street to clean up those second stories, but to the extent that there's potentially innovative funding models available to get the job done, I think that's worth having a look at. So I want to, I guess, finish where I began by saying brilliant job is being done here. Let's keep the effort up. Let's take it to the next level. Looking forward to voting in favour of this motion. Councillor Andrew Rouse.
Just a quick question, Lord Mayor. This might be best answered by management. Noting 4.8, report to councils on high-cost graffiti or vandalism cleaning jobs that may be suitable for civil proceedings. Irrespective of the suitability for civil proceedings, at the moment, do we publicly report in any form or fashion the financial burden on the City of Melbourne for cleaning up graffiti and vandalism in the public domain?
Alison Layton, did you want to lead us off?
Thank you, Councillor Rouse, for that question, and through you, Lord Mayor, I think Vince is best placed to respond.
Thank you. In the form of reporting, we do it through the annual plan and budget process. And what I mean by that is what we allocate to graffiti removal is the cost of graffiti removal for everything that we do, not just the high access graffiti within the municipality. If that answers the question, if not, I'm happy.
But in, I guess, the year afterwards in the, call it an acquittal process, there is this is what it cost the City of Melbourne last year to clean
Yes.
graffiti.
Yes, that's right.
Ken? I don't think we're in debate.
No, not debate, to answer part of the question.
Is there something that hasn't been answered there?
Yes.
All right.
Councillor Rose, item 4.8 has this intention to work with the media team in the City of Melbourne to every year to try to publicise that to the public, as we're discussing portfolio. So that's one of the intention with this amended.
All right, thank you for that. All right, does any other council wish to speak to this item? No, in that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm delighted to declare that carried unanimously. All right, we move on to our next agenda item, 6.5, Post-Travel Report, Mission to India, November 2025. There is a motion which I request our gun team in council business to bring up on the screen. That is the one. I'm going to move that motion, looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Sorry, everybody. I'm very pleased to be able to report back to council in a very open and transparent way about the results from this particular mission delivered for Melbourne, and I am indeed incredibly proud of the results that were delivered. India is the fastest growing major economy in the world, and we used this mission as an opportunity to aggressively pursue new opportunities for Melbourne. Our mission has secured more than 1,000 new tech jobs for Melbourne and close to $100 million in economic uplift, with a strong pipeline of future investment behind it. It's fair to say we chased down every opportunity that we could identify in India, and it was extraordinary to see the response we received. It was the first business mission to India of the modern era here at the City of Melbourne, and we were very, very, very warmly welcomed. And of course, Melbourne is in the box seat to reap the benefits of India's growing economy because we have the largest Indian diaspora in Australia. Indeed, Melbourne is the Indian capital of Australia. And we are now trying to make the most of that human bridge and deliver economic benefits for our city. We also strengthened formal ties with Delhi and Bengaluru, signing letters of intent to explore Friendship City agreements. In Goa, I was honoured to represent Melbourne at the International Film Festival. We also attended the biggest education summit in India, in Delhi, and the biggest tech summit in India, in Bengaluru, indeed close to the biggest in the world. So, biggest tech summit, biggest education summit, biggest film festival. It was an extraordinarily busy and productive trip. Very, very proud of the results we achieved. Indeed, I'd be hard-pressed to think of another business mission that has ever delivered the results that this one did. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Some of the most critical work that this council is asked to do this term is to make sure that our city is thriving again, that our office towers are full, that our city is vibrant and filled with people, and that Melbourne's economy is set up for future success. And one of the few ways you can do that in a capital city is making sure that you are on the world stage, attracting the headquarters and the jobs that mean Melbourne prospers now and into the future. And that was a very large part of this trip. You've heard from the Lord Mayor how, as a result of this mission, over 1,000 jobs were committed for our city. I want to give you an example of that. One of the major tech companies we met with, Tech Mahindra, they already employ around 900 people in Melbourne. As a result of this trip, they have announced 500 additional jobs in Melbourne. That is a huge increase. So when we talk about making sure that Melbourne CBD is a thriving business district. This is one of the ways that this council has made sure that is the case. But of course, we're not just a business city. Melbourne is a knowledge capital, a sporting capital, and a cultural capital. And that's why I'm delighted that while we're in India, we also participated in DIDAC, Asia's largest education trade fair. We attended the Business of Sport Summit, where we were lucky enough to speak. And we also launched the Melbourne Delhi Creative Cities Partnership, because it makes sense when you are a cultural capital that you are looking for opportunities to draw the brightest creative minds from around the world. This mission strengthened our relationship with India. You've heard from the Lord Mayor, this is the first mission to India in the modern era of this council, and that is the right and an important thing to do. Not just because we've got the largest and fastest growing Indian diaspora anywhere in Australia, but because the relationship we have with India is a key part of Melbourne's future economic and cultural success.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this agenda item? Councillor Andrew Rouse, I'm seeing movement at the station there.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just add a few brief comments. I think you've both spoken very well and covered most of it. I think one of the really important things that we don't talk about in relation to these jobs and the 1,000 jobs that you just spoke about is not that this is just 1,000 jobs for locals here in Melbourne, but in our tech sector, this is one of the really important things that we see is that momentum breeds momentum in this space. We look at other cities that have had huge amounts of success, places like San Fran, places like Boston, and one of the really valuable things that they have is an experienced group within their knowledge economy, people that have worked for big companies, then go on to start smaller companies and grow them up. And that momentum, breeding momentum, is a really, really important part in maintaining our knowledge economy here in Melbourne. Also really want to emphasise the Bengaluru Tech Summit and just what the opportunities that leads for us. This is a tech summit that has 100,000 people. That is as big as our grand final. And this is what India is doing to advance their knowledge economy, to advance the support for startups. They're having a literal grand final to support that. So I think that sets a high bar for the types of things and how big and ambitious we can be thinking, dreaming and acting here in Melbourne, Victoria and also Australia. I also want to mention it wasn't just all great things when it comes to tech. There was also the Creative Cities Partnership and Cultural Exchange initiatives with the Asian Heritage Foundation, which I think presents some phenomenal opportunities for Melbourne's arts and creative scene as well. Look, there's been a lot of debate tonight. At the end of the day, I think this can be summarised by saying that in Melbourne, we choose connection over isolation, innovation over complacency, and opportunity over hesitation. And I think that is reflected very much so in the metrics and a very successful mission with some very positive outcomes for Melbourne as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors want to speak to this item? Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just remind the public in here, because usually the term junket is being used a lot when councillors, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, they are going overseas. I have a completely interpretation of that, and I think traveling and going overseas and seeing what's the importance to see different cultures, making business, is a very important element to take you from an environment that you are every day during the year to open your mind and for you to rethink in different ways and models to operate. We are here, we are voted as councillors, and we have important decisions to do. And I think this can help a lot when it comes to make decisions for the progress of the city, that we are well-traveled, well-educated, and it's a complexity of things we're putting together to be the best councillors, the best representatives for the public. So I just, like, if I would be working for a multinational company, they would be paying me extra hours if I was in there representing the city. A lot of the councillors in here are paid to work part-time, and they happy to be sometimes working for 8 to 12 hours in there. And I have been watching closely what they have been doing there, and I promise that to the public. So I don't see this as a problem. I see it as an investment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? I might just give a brief reply to the debate and pick up a point made by Councillor Camillo. I think it's absolutely right for the public to scrutinise all expenditure by the City of Melbourne, but particularly expenditure by councillors when engaging in international travel. For the record, and it's incumbent on the council and councillors to be able to demonstrate clear benefits from that activity. In my case, I want to put on the record, I made a very clear election commitment that if I was given the honour of leading the city as Lord Mayor, I was going to aggressively pursue economic opportunities for Melbourne, opportunities in trade, jobs, investment, culture, through engagement with our region, particularly the region we live here. Thinking here about Bengaluru, Delhi, Tianjin, Chengdu. These are some of the fastest growing cities in the world, and they're in our neighbourhood, and they present huge opportunities for us here in Melbourne. Melbourne is the best city in the world, but we are a long way away from some of the world's major population centres, and we need to absolutely get out there and proactively seize the opportunities there for us, reach for those opportunities, and that's exactly what we're doing. All right, on that note, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm going to declare that carried unanimously. Oh, apologies. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Camillo, and abstaining Councillor Guest. Okay, that motion is passed. We move on to agenda item 6.6, post-travel report by Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees, C40 World Mayors Summit. And I believe that there is an amendment to this item, meaning that I have a conflict of interest, so I will recuse myself, and the Deputy Lord Mayor will take on the chair.
Sorry, for the benefits of the members of the community and for those watching online, the Local Government Act makes it very clear that if the Lord Mayor is not chairing the meeting, by definition, the Deputy Lord Mayor assumes the chair.
Thank you. Director of Governance, we are at agenda item 6.6. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No. In that case, I'm looking for a motion to be put on the screen and seeking a mover for that motion, Councillor Griffiths, and a seconder.
I did have a question. The Lord Mayor said there was an amendment. Did he misspeak?
I believe he did.
Okay, I will second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball. Over to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and I presume that it was the fact that there's two clauses contained in the motion that's before us tonight that was what the Lord Mayor mentioned. But I'm certainly very happy to be moving this motion and even in his absence, thank the Lord Mayor for the work that he put in going to this conference ahead of C30 over in Brazil last year as part of the C40 World Mayors Summit. So the COP30 was occurring after this. There was a very large amount of work, as anyone who has read the report can see, that the Lord Mayor did, but also I'd like to thank our team for all the preparation they put into this. It was a very significant conference and it's fantastic to see Melbourne not only taking the opportunity to learn from other cities around the world, but also to share our experience and our knowledge as a leader in the areas of dealing with climate change. And particularly noting that one of the things that the Lord Mayor was doing was participating as one of the founding members. Melbourne is one of the founding members of the C40 Cool Cities Accelerator. And even though it obviously seems like a long time ago for those of us sitting in the chamber tonight at 8:30 when it's cold outside, but even thinking about the day that Melbourne has gone through today in terms of the temperature, the summer that we've just lived through, and recognising the fact that we are a city which is particularly vulnerable to heating and that our residents and people who visit the city are particularly affected by those. The fact that we are one of the founding cities out of 33 that are getting together to think about ways that we can do more to combat the effects of extreme heat, to redesign cities physically and to redesign the spaces and the ways that we move around them is just one of a large number of actions that we're taking to ensure that we're preparing for climate change, something which is increasingly important that cities do, as we see in some instances national governments moving away from it, and we've seen some of that in the US this week. And the only other thing I'd say in terms of demonstrating just a small part of the good outcomes that have come from the Lord Mayor's trip is the motion that we had last week on data centres and on AI infrastructure. That stemming directly from some of the meetings that the Lord Mayor had while he was overseas, aligning us with some of the largest and most progressive cities in the world who are dealing with similar issues, and the fact that we're out having those conversations, I think is a very positive thing, and I'm certainly very happy to be moving both parts of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Over to you, Councillor Olivia.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And Councillor Griffiths has stolen all my notes. I'm happy to second without further comment.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No. Is that no? Then I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Dr. Ball, Councillor Liu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Louie, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths. All those against. Councillor Dr. Guest abstaining. Could I ask that the Lord Mayor be invited to rejoin the meeting and to resume the role of chair? You can confidently resume the role of chair. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Noting that this concludes the reports from management. We move therefore on to general business, and there are 4 items of general business this evening. The first of those, notice of motion, Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell, Fairer Melbourne Better Early Years. And I now call on Aaron Moon, who requested the opportunity to speak on this item. Thanks, Aaron, for your patience and interest. Looking forward to hearing your submission.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I strongly support this motion that Rashina Campbell's brought tonight, and its focus on improving the outcomes in the early years, and particularly the point where it says increasing the levels of physical activity. If we're serious about changing that trajectory, we must not only look at the services inside the buildings, but also the environments around them. So I want to speak from lived experience. So every Friday morning, I run a bike bus from Parkville Gardens to Flemington Primary School. We meet at a set location, ride together on a planned route, and arrive at school as a team. We're safe, visible, and joyful. And I use that word deliberately, joyful, because the difference is when they're riding to school versus when they're in a car is extraordinary. They are energized, they're laughing, they're talking to each other, they're in different grades and they're friends. Some of them literally have jumped for joy when they've come to the bike bus, and the parents tell me their children are looking forward to it all week. For many, it's their main burst of physical activity before 9 a.m. It builds independence, road awareness, social connection, and confidence. Importantly, it builds equity. Riding a bike or scooter is free. It doesn't require a car or fuel, but it does require streets that feel safe for them. So what we see on Friday is simple. When children are given a safe space and a collective support, they choose active transport. They don't need convincing, they need enabling. That's why, as part of this review, I'm really strongly advocating to see physical activity in early years and encourage councillors to seriously consider school street style interventions. So timed safety zones around primary schools and early learning centres during specifically drop-off and pick-up times. We see this in cities overseas with temporary traffic restrictions. It reduces congestion and increases walking and cycling, behaviour shifts when the safest option becomes the easiest option. And I want to be clear, it's not about banning cars in these locations. They're required, and that's okay. But it's about prioritising children for that short window of drop-off and pick-up time. So I extend a genuine invitation to all councillors to come along on the bike bus on a Friday morning with me and watch the children arrive grinning from ear to ear and speak with the parents, feel the atmosphere that they are. These policy discussions that we have here can feel pretty abstract in this building, but when you see a primary school kid ride to school with a group of friends, it makes it concrete. So I just say in summary that if we want healthier children, stronger concentration in class, more resilient communities, then building daily movement into their child's routines is a practical, evidence-based step.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Aaron. I now call on Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell to formally move the motion, which will be put on the screen, confirming that is the motion, and looking to Councillor Gladys Liu to second it. Thank you, Councillor Liu. Back to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Aaron, for your submission. It's a tragedy that in this lucky country, almost a quarter of kids start school developmentally behind. And that's a trend that has only worsened in recent years. That means by the time a child starts school, a quarter of them are behind in key development milestones. Physical activity and physical wellbeing, yes, but also cognitive skills, literacy, numeracy and communication skills. Not only do those children start school developmentally behind, almost half of them never catch up. That is a tragedy for them, it's a tragedy for their families, and it's actually a tragedy for all of us. Fairness in Melbourne starts when everyone gets the best possible start in life. And the best place to level the playing field in the early years, it's local government. We are the level of government that is closest to children from birth to school. We provide immunisations, maternal child and health services, playgroups, kindergartens, libraries and so much more. No other level of government has those touch points with children in their early years. Our maternal child and health nurses are heroes in this municipality, but it is clear that we as a council can do more to set up every child to thrive. In the City of Melbourne, around 24% of children are starting school developmentally vulnerable. In some parts of our municipality, that is much higher. In Carlton, the figure is over 50%. More than half the children starting school are developmentally behind. And the tragedy of that is it is a time of life over which a child has absolutely no control. The data shows that socioeconomic status and coming from a non-English speaking background is a factor that strongly influences developmental outcomes. Children from disadvantaged backgrounds are more than 3 times more likely to be developmentally behind. So, what if we at the City of Melbourne made it our mission to ensure that every child who is born or raised in Melbourne, regardless of where they come from, what their parents do or earn, what language they speak at home, they all have the chance to lead their best life in this city. The other thing we know is acting and intervening in the early years is critical. By the time a child turns 5, around 90% of their brain development has occurred. Early literacy, language, nutritional and physical activity shape lifelong outcomes. And unfortunately, once gaps appear in the early years, they are very difficult and very expensive to close. Costs like remedial education, healthcare, and in the worst cases, unemployment and youth crime. So, this motion seeks to identify the ways that we at the City of Melbourne can close these developmental gaps through the services we deliver in the early years, with the aim of improving early years literacy, increasing physical activity, increasing access to nutritious food, preventing domestic violence and providing support, providing interventions for children with developmental delays, and importantly, supporting families for a family-centred approach to better childhood development outcomes. This is vital and life-changing work. And while I hope the City of Melbourne will be a leader in this space, a first in providing the best possible start to life for children, I hope we will also not be the last municipality to do this. A fair Melbourne starts with a fair start for every child. So I commend this motion to my councillor colleagues.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I want to thank Deputy Lord Mayor for bringing this motion before us tonight. As the portfolio head for community health and city services, I'm very, very pleased to be seconding this motion. As a mother of two and a grandmother of one, I know the importance of early childhood development. It plays a vital role in lifelong learning and contributes significantly to a child's physical and mental well-being, as well as their education. And thank you to Aaron Moon for your contributions tonight and also your invitation. I totally agree with you. Physical activity is so important. As a fitness instructor, I know for any age this is important, and especially for young children as well. Now, as the Deputy Lord Mayor has just mentioned, these developmental vulnerable children that we are seeing in Victoria and also in Melbourne, and in particular in the suburb of Carlton, it is alarming. It is overwhelming. So we, as the local government, are best placed to do something. So I think it is just right to ask the CEO to undertake a review that addresses how the City of Melbourne can strengthen our early years literacy outcomes, including physical activity levels for early years, which again are vital to our children's development. So the review will also consider how we can better support families by equipping them with the knowledge and resources that they need. I look forward to the outcome of this review and to seeing the positive impact it will have on families within the City of Melbourne. So thank you again for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just have a question for the mover and seconder, specifically referencing 1.4.5, and my apologies for not flagging this earlier. With your consent, I'd like to propose a small addition to that sentence where it has explore resources, partnerships, and my proposal would be to add innovative digital diagnostic tools. I know this is something with our world-class biomedical precinct has been working on, and I know they are working on some phenomenal solutions at the moment, explicitly calling that out as a means of efficiently and effectively getting the diagnostic in so the intervention can occur, I think would be a tremendous outcome that would support the motion.
Right, you happy with that? Councillor Liu, you're happy with that? All right, let's add the words "and innovative diagnostic tools" to explore resources, partnerships, pathways. Yeah, and I'd put it in there.
I think it has to go before pathways, doesn't it? So explore resources, partnerships, comma, and innovative. Don't put an and in. Innovative diagnostic tools and pathways.
And pathways, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, mover and seconder.
So we'll take that now as the amended motion that is before us, and we'll continue with the debate for the sake of speed. Would any councillors like to speak to the motion that is before us? Councillor Ralph Camillo.
I just would like to welcome the Deputy Lord Mayor, especially in the item 1.24, increasing access, nutritious and affordable food. Since I moved to Australia, I've been observed that a lot of kids, they come back home by 3 p.m. and some of them, they don't have any kind of meal during the day. Sometimes they don't bring their lunch to schools, and maybe just explore the opportunity to be help those less fortunate with doing a prevention. Instead to wait for a kid to grow up and not have a development, we're going and doing early intervention, and any kind of early intervention and support. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I very welcome your motion tonight.
All right, would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No, in that case, we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to the next agenda item, notice of motion, agenda item 7.2, notice of motion, Councillor Philip Leilou, supporting the 40th anniversary of the 2026 Melbourne Writers' Festival. Can I request that the motion that has been drafted, I think it might have some amendments in it. Can we please bring up the amended version? Yeah, is that the amended version? I think Adelaide Writers, it's actually called Adelaide Writers Week, is it not? It is. So can we just, I don't believe that's the correct amended motion.
So the only amendment you're seeking is 1.2, Adelaide Writers' Week.
Yep, let's make that amendment. Want to get the name of the festival right. All right, so see that in 1.2. And then Councillor Leilou, wasn't there a new part at the end?
1.2 needs the removal of the Adelaide Writers' Week. It's just Adelaide Writers' Week.
And put an apostrophe after the S because it's about writers. So, no, after the S. It's all the writers get a week. And the same would be true of the Melbourne Writers' Festival.
And Councillor Ball, did you not wish to have a final par in there that referred to Writers Victoria?
I have, yes, which Philip has kindly agreed to move as an amended motion. It's 1.7.
So can we just scroll down?
Yeah,
I couldn't see that.
It was there and you made them take it away.
There it is. That's the one in that version. Now we just need to go back and make that. Let's amend this version. All right. So I believe with those changes we have an amended motion before us. Are you happy to move this, Councillor Leilou? Yep. And I'm happy to second it. Back to you, Councillor Philip Leilou.
No problem. I'm happy to support this. We are the UNESCO City of Literature, and we do have, with Australia's oldest public library, literature is one that defines us, and something that we want to really celebrate. Note that it's only $20,000 for a special event, and 40 years is always. There are a lot of others who have many years, but 40 years for a Writers' Festival is quite important. Also note that Adelaide cancelled theirs, so potentially that could be a combined for those who missed out on the ones in Adelaide. They can come to Melbourne, and so and this is a once-off. So happy to support it and go through.
Thanks very much. As seconder, I'm very pleased to speak to this item as well. I want to thank Councillor Leilou for bringing it forward. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Melbourne Writers' Festival. Milestone anniversaries matter. They give us natural moments to reflect, to celebrate and to support the institutions that shape our cultural identity, and the Melbourne Writers' Festival certainly does that. As this motion notes, it's a $20,000 allocation, but importantly, it helps open up the Melbourne Town Hall and make this city's civic heart part of this year's 40th Melbourne Writers' Festival. It also, there's many tens of thousands of dollars of in-kind support that is coming as part of the partnership between the City of Melbourne and the Writers' Festival. So when you put that all together, it's well over $100,000 of support that the city is providing to make the 40th Melbourne Writers' Festival truly the biggest and the best that this city has ever hosted. As Councillor Leilou has noted, earlier this year, the Adelaide Writers' Week was cancelled. That was an absolute tragedy. Writers need writers' festivals. It's a really important way that they showcase work and engage with the broader community. And so it was a real blow to the literary ecosystem of this country when the Adelaide Writers' Week was cancelled. Adelaide Writers' Week, of course, is the biggest free literary festival in Australia. You could just sort of describe it as the Formula One Grand Prix of writers' festivals. And so it was very sad when it was no longer proceeding in Adelaide. Fortunately, with these additional funds from the City of Melbourne, Melbourne is stepping up, and we will host this extraordinary major event here in Melbourne. And now, as a result of this motion, bringing Melbourne Town Hall as a major venue into the festival, additional funding to ensure that major headline acts who may have been participating in Adelaide Writers' Festival found themselves without a gig. Well, now they can be part of the Melbourne Writers' Festival for this all-important 40th year. And so I'm very, very pleased to be seeing this motion coming forward and hoping that it meets with councillor support. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item?
Yep.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just wanted to address specifically 1.7, given that that was an additional amendment and the mover and seconders spoke eloquently for the entire motion. But as Councillor Leilou said, Melbourne does proudly hold the title of a UNESCO City of Literature. That recognition is not symbolic. It reflects a living, breathing literary ecosystem that sustains writers, readers, festivals, and fundamentally ideas. At the heart of that ecosystem are organisations like Australian Poetry, like Writers Victoria, like Express Media. They're our state's peak body supporting writers at every stage of their careers. They do this through mentoring, professional development, regional outreach and inclusive programs. These organisations actually build the pipeline of talent that fuels our literary culture. That pipeline matters profoundly for events like Melbourne Writers' Festival. Festivals don't exist in isolation. They depend on a strong, supported community of writers, emerging and established, who have been nurtured, developed and connected through these organisations. If we actually weaken that foundation, we risk weakening the festival sector, our creative economy, and Melbourne's global reputation as a city of ideas. So beyond cultural value, there is actually economic impact. Literary events drive visitation. They activate our precincts. They support hospitality and enhance Melbourne's brand internationally. But creative excellence does not happen by accident. It requires infrastructure and investment, and restoring and continuing funding for these organisations. And I stress for the CEO to write to the Premier and Minister expressing our views and making sure that the ecosystem that underpins these great cultural strengths of Melbourne continues into the future.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Scott. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Nick, Lord Mayor. I almost certainly will support this motion, but I'd like to make a comment on the financial side. You mentioned earlier your election commitments to trade, etc. There were also commitments towards rates and a rates freeze that still needs to be honoured and budgeted for. So this is a question I'm going to ask not just here, but on an ongoing basis when something new comes up that I suspect isn't currently budgeted for. I realise it's only $20,000 out of a budget of $700 million, but still I'd ask management at all, where will this money be funded from within the budget, please?
Thank you, Councillor Guest, for your question. And through you, Lord Mayor, I'll ask Lauren Bilkower, the relevant director, to provide an answer.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Guest. We do from time to time receive returned funds from other grant recipients when projects are unable to proceed or when organisations do fall over. So we do have funds available, for instance, from the cancellation of the photo exhibition this year. So this $20,000 can be funded from the existing grants budget. Should we receive advice from our finance colleagues that would be the appropriate place to source it from.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 7.3, notice of motion. Lord Mayor, Commonwealth Defence Estate Divestment Opportunities, South Bank and Carlton. I now call on Tony Penner, who from the South Bank Residents Association, to speak for no more than 3 minutes. Welcome back to the lectern, Tony.
Lord Mayor, councillors, Victoria Barracks has stood through Federation, 2 World Wars and the transformation of Melbourne from colonial city to global capital. It has served Australia for more than 170 years and occupies a highly significant civic position opposite the Shrine of Remembrance and adjacent to the Domain Parklands. Victoria Barracks is not simply a parcel of land. Established in the 1850s, it is one of Australia's oldest military sites. It housed British regiments in the colonial era, and during the Second World War it became the nerve centre of national decision-making, including the War Cabinet Room. I am president of the South Bank Residents Association and a South Bank resident. I also serve in the Australian Defence Force and have had the privilege of working within Victoria Barracks. It is part of our national story and part of South Bank's identity. Its endurance has been more than physical, it has been symbolic. I rise to express strong support for this notice of motion. It is prudent that Council proactively develop options and planning positions now, before decisions are made that will shape this precinct for generations. Victoria Barracks is not simply a 5.7 hectare site. It is one of Australia's most significant defence heritage precincts, with 8 Commonwealth Heritage listed buildings protected under the EPBC Act. Its bluestone buildings, parade ground and War Cabinet Room are part of our national story and part of Melbourne's civic landscape. Clause 1.1.1 correctly identifies heritage-led adaptive reuse as a central opportunity. That must mean more than retaining facades. It should protect the integrity, scale and spatial character of the precinct, particularly given its position opposite the Shrine of Remembrance and adjacent to the Domain Parklands. Clause 1.1.2 seeks advice on land use and built form controls. It's equally critical. Once Commonwealth Government ownership ceases, development pressure will be significant. Height, bulk, overshadowing of Wall Street and nearby residential buildings, wind impacts, traffic generation and construction management all need early clarity. Establishing expectations now will provide certainty for both the community and any future proponents. Clauses 1.1.3 and 1.2 appropriately link this opportunity to the draft community infrastructure plan and the open space strategy. The identification of a potential 1 to 3 hectare neighbourhood open space in this precinct is significant in a rapidly growing St Kilda Road, South Bank Domain area. Expanded open space and community infrastructure would meaningfully enhance livability. Local stakeholders have already expressed concerns regarding overdevelopment, public access and consultation. I encourage Council to advocate for structured engagement with immediate neighbours and owners corporations throughout the divestment process, not only at the statutory planning stage. This is a rare moment where Commonwealth land decisions intersect directly with local strategic planning. Council's early advocacy, including engagement with relevant ministers, will be crucial in ensuring that any future use reflect community infrastructure needs, heritage stewardship and long-term precinct planning. Victoria Barracks has stood in this location for over 170 years. If it is to transition from defence use, it should do so in a way that strengthens rather than diminishes its civic contribution. I commend Council for taking a proactive approach and encourage continued strategic leadership on this matter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony Penner, for that submission and for your service as well. Can I see if... is David Hamilton here? Oh, David Hamilton's on here via Zoom. Okay, my apologies. Can I request that David Hamilton is joining us via Zoom from what looks like Cambridge?
He wishes.
Just let's make sure we've got the audio working. David, thanks for your patience this evening. We won't start the clock or anything till we know we've got... Can you just speak so we can check?
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, David. Over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor and councillors. South Bank 3006 strongly supports the brief contained in this resolution before council, and we believe that the council has a role to develop options for the potential future uses of this Victoria Barracks site and the repatriation clinic site. We believe the motion is pivotal as it ensures council can actively shape the debate surrounding the proposed sale and redevelopment of these significant St Kilda Road assets. This is a complex site, both in terms of its history and its potential. And we believe that it fulfills the council's strategic role, and it is the natural leader to shape the debate, because council can canvass strategic options. It can prioritise public benefit, and it can shape the outcome in terms of the future of the site. We know that sites such as this have the potential to be lost, as much of the debate on item 6.3 tonight highlighted. But this is a golden opportunity for the council to play its leadership role. And it enables the economic as well as the social and community potential of this site to be adequately reviewed. So we'd urge all councillors to support this resolution. And we'd note that it does not involve the council in acquiring the site, but rather using its soft power to frame the site's future. And that is a massive commitment, a massive benefit from having the council involved at the very outset of this process, not after the event. So we commend this resolution to you and hope you all support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I now call on Natalie Roberts from South Bank Royale Owners Corporation, who is also joining us via Zoom. Thank you, Natalie, for your patience. We can see you on the big screen. Let's just check if we got audio.
Hi there, guys. Good evening, Lord Mayor Rees, councillors, members of the Future Melbourne Committee. I represent the South Bank Royale Owners Corporation and the 145 owners and residents at 90 to 102 Wells Street, South Bank. We live directly opposite the main entrance to Victoria Barracks and making us the closest residential neighbour. We support your notice of motion, particularly with its focus on heritage-led adaptive reuse, built form controls, community infrastructure and open space, and the Council's partnership role with the Commonwealth throughout the divestment process. We also align to similar views by David Hamilton and the South Bank Residents Association earlier. From our building, residents, ground floor and top floor alike, enjoy unique rear views to the heritage-listed Bluestone buildings. These are rare sightlines, enhance our amenity and connection to Melbourne's history. We're concerned that redevelopment, including potential removal of existing open features such as the tennis courts, the parking lots within the precinct, would block these views, overshadow Wells Street, obscure the vistas to the Domain Parklands and the Shrine of Remembrance, and devalue our property. We are concerned about further high-rise development in South Bank, which is already densely transformed. This would worsen overshadowing, traffic construction disruption, amenity strain, and critically add to the existing strain on electrical infrastructure in the area. To protect these values, we urge you to adopt the motion and ensure the requested advice includes strict heritage enforcement, early built form controls on height, bulk overshadowing views, traffic, wind impacts, and infrastructure capacity, including electrical, especially for Wells Street. Safeguard our low-rise vistas to the parklands and back views to Bluestone buildings. Priority for 1 to 3 hectares of neighbourhood open space and heritage access. And of course, early consultation with immediate neighbours and owners corporations like ours during the divestment process. We feel it is a generational chance for heritage-led renewal with real civic benefits. We just want to be involved. So thank you for your leadership. We're available for engagement and questions and urge your strong advocacy to the Commonwealth for these protections.
All right. Thank you, Natalie, for that submission and for the good work you do for the South Bank Royale OC. All right. That concludes submissions on this item. I'm now going to move a motion which I request be put on the screen for councillors to see. If we could just scroll down. And I'm looking, you've got a question? Okay, before we move it, we can ask the question, yeah.
So just to clarify, so when you talk about in 1.1.1, potential to enhance open space and public realm, so just want to get an idea, Lord Mayor, are you saying, can you just clarify a bit more? So are we talking about the whole 5.7 hectare? Because there is already public space and everything, but I just want to clarify, can you just clarify on that political part? And you are saying we do keep what is heritage, we do have in there, the grass courtyard, maybe that is, so are you saying that, or are you saying anything else that's not heritage, we remove it and we turn it into open space as well?
Look, the short answer to that is that it will depend on the outcome of a review of what the optimal outcome for the site is. From a City of Melbourne perspective, what we're doing here is sort of demanding a seat at the table with the Commonwealth, and we're not seeking a zero-sum game here, Councillor Leilu, but we also know that through the work we've done here at the City of Melbourne, like our draft community infrastructure plan, that there are very significant community needs in South Bank, for things like community spaces, culturally focused facilities, recreation areas, family and youth services, and some of the other issues that we've heard about identified by Natalie and Tony and David this evening. So we're looking for a balanced approach here.
Sure. So all the things you've said requires a building, a place, right? So if you do take open space, then those things won't happen. So and also, if there is you can't have there needs to be kind of a priority. So if you're going to have potential school there, a potential something there, you can't have open space. So what is the kind of priority that we're kind of pushing or limiting to, or you're pushing for?
Look, I think we're moving into debate with those comments. Let me speak to the motion, and then if you've got further questions, we can raise them there, or you can debate the matter.
Sure. I just want to clarify, what you mean by it, because it's your motion. So I just wanted to make sure that I know the open space and public realm. Yeah. So if you can focus a bit on that, because if you have open space and public realm, then there is no chance to do other stuff on it because it's just, grass, right? So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. I mean open, publicly accessible open space that could be used for community activities. There's some beautiful botanical gardens in that area, but you don't see what I would describe as neighbourhood facilities, barbecues, park benches, that sort of thing. Just to give you one example, and there are many. Our community infrastructure needs study or plan has identified in this area what the needs of this community are. It's the most densely populated suburb in Melbourne, indeed probably Australia. And so what we need to do is go back and look at that bit of work, look at what the potential opportunities are here, and work with the Commonwealth on getting to a sensible outcome. I mean, the bottom line here is this can't all be about defence profit or developer profit. There's a real community benefit that we need to ensure is delivered for the people of Melbourne, for the people of South Bank, as part of this process. All right, they're great questions though. I'm going to move the motion, looking for a councillor to second it. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So can I begin by thanking the folks that submitted tonight, and thank you for your ongoing activism in the community. It's so important. It is hard to overstate the importance of these sites that are coming up for sale under this Defence Department's sale process. These sites are being sold across Australia, but the sites here in the City of Melbourne are amongst the most important plots of land in our entire municipality. In the case of St Kilda Road, we're talking about 5.7 hectares of land right on the doorstep of the city as part of South Bank, the most densely populated suburb in Australia, an area in which we have identified significant need for new community facilities and spaces. And so this is literally a once-in-a-generation opportunity to see if we can try and address some of those. Tony Penner touched on the historical significance of the Victoria Barracks. Again, from an Australian perspective, it is hard to overstate. This is the location where US General Douglas MacArthur and Australian Prime Minister John Curtin planned the defence of our nation during World War II. This is almost like the Churchill war rooms in London in terms of their significance to Australia's military history and the history of our nation. In terms of the site that is for sale in Carlton, that is the University of Melbourne Regiment. That, of course, is the regiment which Sir John Monash was a member of. Arguably Australia's most decorated soldiers, certainly one of the greatest Australians that ever lived. So these are very important historical significant sites, and that needs to be taken into account. As we have discussed already, the sale of these properties can't be all about profit. There needs to be a sensible balance here that takes into account the community's needs and delivers important community benefits. And as I've mentioned, we know from the significant work we have already done that South Bank urgently needs more accessible community spaces, culturally focused facilities, recreation areas, family and youth services, and more open space, particularly in that neighbourhood park space. And so we will only get one chance to get this right. I also just want to quickly flag that we have seen Commonwealth owned sites disposed of in the past in the City of Melbourne where things have gone badly wrong. I think here are, for example, the Postal building on Rathdown Street, which vastly exceeds in height any of the other buildings in Carlton and overshadows the heritage-listed Royal Exhibition buildings. Now, the reason why that building exists totally at odds with the rest of Carlton is because as it was a Commonwealth site, it was not covered by the same built form controls, the same planning controls as other land in the area. It would be completely unacceptable for these sites to be developed in a way which was not consistent with the very well-considered planning controls that we have for these areas, which a lot of thought has gone into because they are very valuable and significant parts of our municipality. So we need to get that bit right as well. In short, we are demanding a seat at the table with the Commonwealth in this process, and we are committing ourselves to work cooperatively with them to ensure Defence Department gets a good outcome, that yes, we do see development on these sites, but importantly, we also deliver much needed community benefits as well. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I also thank our submitters who I think have really clearly articulated the need for this motion, that this is not a space that we can vacate. Indeed, it is critical that the City of Melbourne is at the table for these discussions. And having previously moved a motion about better outcomes for kids in their early years, we do know that South Bank, one of the most densely populated suburbs in Australia, is also the home to so many families who do have limited space in the home. So the opportunity to find community open space, to provide things like exercise equipment, playgrounds, barbecues, to allow families to not just live in what is the greatest city in the world, Melbourne, but actually lead their best life by having access to the open space that we know makes apartment living so desirable. This is such a unique opportunity. Can I close by endorsing the Lord Mayor's remarks and commending this to my councillor colleagues?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm declaring that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 7.4, which is a petition and it's residents' opposition to the Hawke Street greening concepts. I'm going to call on a councillor to move the motion that is appearing on the screen, just to stress for particularly new councillors that might not have seen a petition lodged before. This is a procedural motion where we are accepting it. We are not expressing a view about the petition, its pros, its cons, whether we support or not. We are procedurally accepting the petition. So who would like to move this? Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you, Councillor Guest. All those in favour of us supporting this motion, thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. Yes, indeed. Okay, that concludes the items of general business. We move on to urgent business, of which I don't believe there is any. We move on to agenda item 9, public questions. Another 15 minutes has been provided for members of the public to ask questions, and we do have a number. I might just seek some procedural advice. I am noting that Kate Kennedy has sent through 4 questions. A reminder that under the governance rules, thank you, David Thompson, if someone wishes to ask more than 2 questions, the chair may defer the subsequent questions till all other persons have requested or asked a question, okay, or may not be asked to read out if time allotted for public questions has expired. Okay, in view of that, I'm going to ask, and is that the only one of our written questions which has not yet been asked, David?
Correct.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to ask, are there any questions by people who are present that they wish to direct towards council? Aaron Moon, come on up.
Why not? Questions without notice at the FMC. So, as you all know, I'm an advocate for safe and protected bike infrastructure, and I'm watching closely the rollout of our protected bike lane network. Lord Mayor, you are the leading portfolio for infrastructure, and you have a direct responsibility for driving this work forward. We have set out ambitious targets to expand our protected bike network to 2030. And in the bike community, we're watching very closely to ensure that this actually is met. If you recall the budget last year, you'd get an understanding. We know that the many benefits of these bike lanes, yet many of these roadblocks to delivery continue to sit with DTP, and particularly on state-controlled roads. So given that it's an election year in Victoria and transport infrastructure will be firmly in the political spotlight, my question is how, Lord Mayor, as the lead of infrastructure, leveraging this election year to secure faster approvals and stronger commitments from the state government to accelerate the rollout of our 2030 program?
It's a great question, Aaron. As you know, the Victorian Government has funded the rollout of bike lanes along St Kilda Road. Those works are currently underway south of, or I might get this wrong, but sort of south of the south of Victoria Barracks, I'm going to sort of guess there, and they are obviously very important works. The City of Melbourne is currently finalising our advocacy strategy for this election year, and the public will hear more about that. We do that in a very open and transparent way, and so you'll be hearing more about that. But I can assure you that local infrastructure will be a big feature of that work. Great. Thank you, Aaron. All right, any other members of the public present, please come on up.
Good evening. Just regarding Victoria...
Do you want to introduce yourself to council?
My name's Callum. Just regarding Victoria Barracks, has there actually been a vote of the council if you approve or, support or oppose the sale? Has there actually been a... I know in Sydney there's a bit of contention. Some people don't actually want theirs sold. Are you planning on having a vote?
So the motion that is before us this evening requests council to do quite a bit of work around, getting our position lined up. But it didn't go so far as to formally oppose the sale of these sites. It remains an option going forward, but that was not in the motion tonight. the motion tonight actually corrals a whole lot of work that needs to be done very quickly and asks the City of Melbourne to have a seat at the table around the sale process, which is being led by the Commonwealth.
So there might not be a vote that you just say straight, you oppose it, you want the Commonwealth to keep it. That's where I'm kind of going.
Yeah, so I guess the short answer to that is, and this might be unsatisfactory, is there might be, but there might not be.
Right,
We'll wait to see what the further advice is that comes back.
Can I just compliment the Deputy Mayor as well of keeping the debate rolling before? I thought it was very professional.
Well done. All right. Are there any further questions from the public? No, in that case, I'm going to note that Kate Kennedy sent through 4 questions earlier. They are quite lengthy, and the response that's been prepared by officers is quite lengthy as well. Rather than me read that out, I am going to publicly commit to us providing a written response to Kate Kennedy from the Kensington Association to those answers, and I will copy in all councillors to that response when it is sent so that there's visibility there. Councillor Dr. Ball.
I have a question in relation to that, Lord Mayor, if I may. Given that I believe Dr. Kennedy was prevented from attending tonight and would otherwise have read her questions herself, could I ask that the questions be included in full in the minutes and not in summary form, but the questions that she submitted?
Yep, we can absolutely do that. Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Fantastic, thank you.
Evan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? No. Okay. All right. In that case, here we go. In that case, we move to agenda item 10, closure of the meeting. I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this meeting closed at 9:25 p.m. Thank you, Melbourne.